Chapter 2759. Fine. Since you didn't come out, then don't blame this young master for being ruthless. Xiaohua said coldly. This young master saw that you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to sneak attack us while we were looking at the scenery. That's why I called out. Saying this, Xiaohua waved his hand, but in the horizon, in the dark blue night sky, there were many dark clouds that came out of nowhere. Good method. Your Excellency must be the thunder-controlling sect Xiaohua, who is known as the terrifying phoenix. A voice came from the foot of the mountain that was dozens of zhang away. A swordsman wearing a dark red sword robe strangely flashed in midair, and this person's face was filled with unconcealable astonishment. Seeing this swordsman quietly approaching, Li Zongbao and the others were startled, but when they saw that this swordsman was actually at the second grade of the illusory sword realm, they unconsciously understood. Let them all show themselves. Xiaohua said coldly, since they are all here, why hide? Do you think this is interesting? The swordsman stood in midair, his eyes shining brightly in the night, like flashing sword splendor. His gaze was clearly somewhat pensive, as if he was considering whether Xiaohua was bluffing or not. However, Xiaohua was impatient. He pointed his finger and said, You, it's only 3 people, do you think this young master can't detect you? When the swordsman heard this, he was extremely astonished, even more so than when he was discovered by Xiaohua. He waved his hand and said somewhat helplessly, Qing Zhen, Qing Jian, Qing Ming, you all come out. In the place that Xiaohua had just pointed at, a few faint lights flashed in the air. 3 swordsmen of the same height, wearing the same sword equipment, and even their appearances were exactly the same. They appeared there with the same stunned expression. Your Excellency, how did you discover us 3 brothers? The swordsman closest to Xiaohua looked at Xiaohua inconceivably and unexpectedly asked. This Xiao found you, do I have to tell you how I found you? Xiaohua looked at the 4 people and said indifferently, you all called out this Xiao's name. Don't tell me you don't want to tell me your name. This sword is Qing Zhen. The swordsman who spoke cupped his fist and said. I am Qing Jian, I am Qing Ming. The other 2 shouted in unison. As for the swordsman who appeared first, he cupped his hands and said, I am Qi Qingyi from the 7 Spirit Mountain. 7 Spirit Mountains. Hearing this, Xiaohua unconsciously frowned. He immediately thought of Ji Yi from the 7 Extremes Mountains. Have you seen a disciple of my 7 Spirit Mountain? Qi Qingyi asked with a smile when he saw Xiaohua frown. No. Xiaohua faintly shook his head. This Xiao is merely a foundation establishment cultivator. If I had met many experts, how could I still stand here steadily? What are you trying to achieve by hiding here? Li Zongbao was slightly impatient as he raised his voice and asked. You must be Li Zongbao from the Utopia faction. Qi Qingyi said with a smile. Then, he glanced at Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao, who were standing beside Xiaohua. The 4 of you who made great contributions in the great battle of Dao and Sword have all come to my sword domain. I would like to ask what your intentions are. What intentions can I have? Xiaohua shrugged and pointed to the sky. He smiled and said, This Xiao and the others have long heard of the countless wonders of Hing country. Taking advantage of the end of the battle, we specially came to Hing country to travel. Could it be that you think that we Foundation Establishment cultivators have some ulterior motives? Foundation Establishment cultivators? Qi Qingyi sneered. In the current sword domain, any swordsman would shudder at the mention of the terrifying phoenix. If you were to be treated as Foundation Establishment cultivators, you would be able to easily defeat them. If you think of us as Foundation Establishment cultivators, then wouldn't we all be blind? However, Qi Qingyi immediately raised his head to look at the sky and sighed. Although the extreme magnetic ray is a famous scenery in my sword domain, if not for fate, you won't be able to see it. Even this Qi has not appreciated it for many years. You are really lucky to be able to see such a wonderful scenery as soon as you enter my sword domain. However, it's a pity that the swordsmen of my sword domain have sacrificed their lives to protect such a homeland. Yet, it's still difficult to ensure the safety of our sword domain for a few years. Extreme Magnetic Ray. This is the Extreme Magnetic Ray. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart trembled slightly. Your words seem to be wrong. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Fairy Hongxia retorted sarcastically, the Sword Dao War was started by sword cultivators. If not for your wild ambitions of invading our 3 cultivation kingdoms, who would have the patience to start a war with you? Now that the war has been going on for close to 10 years, there are countless casualties. The number of Dao sect cultivators who have fallen in the war is in the hundreds of thousands. Don't these cultivators like this beautiful scenery? Don't these cultivators want to protect the safety of our 3 cultivation countries? Unfortunately, they are cultivators and not ordinary people. Since they have stepped into the ranks of cultivators, they should sacrifice their lives for our Dao sect's foundation. What do you mean by saying these words in front of us? No other reason. It's just a random thought. Qi Qingyi actually smiled slightly and stopped arguing with Fairy Hongxia. If there's nothing else, this Xiao and the rest will continue on. Xiaohua said indifferently. Naturally, this Qi came here for a reason. Qi Qingyi said with a smile, as if the other party was not a hostile opponent. What? Finally going to make a move? Xiaohua stretched lazily and said with a smile. Of course not. Qi Qingyi shook his head and said, this place is my sword domain and is already inside the sword tomb. You all have already escaped from the Dao sword war. How can this Qi face you all as enemies? Oh. You actually know that we don't need to participate in the war. So that's how it is. Xiaohua suddenly realized that the flying sword message sent by the sword transformation swordsman was not for the patrolling disciples of the sword tomb, but for the tool cultivator of the 7 spirit mountains. He did not know what kind of medicine this tool cultivator was trying to sell. Qi Qingyi slapped his hand and a scarlet gold flying sword flew out from his storage bag. He waved his hand and the flying sword slowly flew in front of Xiaohua and said, this is my 7 Spirit Mountain sword invitation. This Qi represents my 7 Spirit Mountain sect master to invite you to the 7 Spirit Mountain. Oh. Inviting us to the 7 Spirit Mountain. Xiaohua was stunned. He waved his hand and took the flying sword into his hand and carefully examined it. This flying sword was completely scarlet gold and had complicated sword patterns engraved on it. The words 7 Spirit Mountain could be faintly seen on the sword patterns. That's right. Qi Qingyi saw Xiaohua take the sword invitation and said with a smile, my 7 Spirit Mountain has a great formation called the Brahma Pagoda. This Qi has long heard that the Dao sect's cultivators are skilled in formations. During the Battle of the Sword Tomb, they laid down the 10-direction annihilation great formation and caused the deaths of many of my sword domain's disciples. Therefore, my 7 Spirit Mountain boldly invites you to come to the 7 Spirit Mountain and give us some pointers on the Brahma Pagoda great formation. Is there something wrong with you? Xiaohua wasn't polite at all, as if he didn't treat Qi Qingyi as an illusory swordsman. We only came to the Han country to travel and broaden our horizons. Why would we go to the 7 Spirit Mountain for no reason? We're living happily now and haven't gotten tired of living yet. You don't dare. Qingming sneered at the side. This Chang has heard of the frightening phoenix's name for a long time, but I never thought that the frightening phoenix wouldn't even have the guts to go to my 7 Spirit Mountain. This Chang is really disappointed. What does it have to do with me whether you're disappointed or not? What does it have to do with you whether I'm brave or timid? Xiaohua didn't seem to be fooled. He flung his sleeve, and the flying sword flew back into Qi Qingyi's hand. He said, "This Xiao has no interest in giving others pointers on formations. If there's nothing else, this Xiao will take his leave. Please wait a moment." Qi Qingyi wasn't surprised. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "You should take a look at the sword invitation first. It won't be too late to refuse." "I won't look," Xiao Hua said coldly. "Even if there's a method for me to immediately become an immortal, this Xiao still won't look. There's naturally no method for becoming an immortal," Qi Qingyi hurriedly said. "However, there's a secret technique for refining spirit tools inside." Spirit tools. When Xiao Hua heard this, astonishment appeared on his face. His eyes turned a few times, and he began to ponder. Ever since he met Ji Ping, Xiao Hua had been reflecting on various aspects. Among them, he had already listed the Dharma treasures as his #1 priority. However, if he wanted to find a Dharma treasure that suited him, it would be extremely difficult. Now, the weapon cultivator of 7 Spirit Mountain was actually offering the method for refining spirit tools that Xiao Hua wanted the most. Qi Qingyi replied with a question. "What about it? So what if I've seen them? So what if I haven't?" Xiao Hua replied ambiguously. Chapter 2760. Ling Yunwu's Sword Pouch and the Ling Feng Sword Set Sword Scroll. If you have them in your storage pouch, please return them to my sword domain. Qi Qingyi finally got to the point. This Xiao finally understands. Xiao Hua laughed when he heard this and replied, "You all are still trying to set this Xiao up. You actually gave me a sword array that I have never seen before and asked me to break it. This so-called secret technique of refining spiritual weapons, and this sword pouch are the stakes. If I can break the Fan Pagoda's array, then the secret technique is mine. If I can't break the array, then shouldn't I hand over the sword pouch?" "That's right, that's the case." Qi Qingyi admitted frankly, "To be honest, this sword pouch is very precious. After the array was broken, we sword cultivator disciples searched for it with all our might. However, we couldn't find any trace of it. Even Ling Yunwu and the rest's flying swords couldn't be found. Thus, I thought of you. If you really have it, then this bet is actually quite fair." "Fair my ass." Fairy Hong Xia was furious and pointed her finger. "You guys set up the array and let Xiao Hua break it alone. Even if he is powerful, how can he be a match for hundreds of people?" I have already considered this matter." Qi Qingyi smiled and said, "My 7 Spirit Mountains Fan Pagoda array is formed by at least 81 disciples. Fairy Hong Xia, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao can all enter the array. Furthermore, my sword domain swordsmen are very particular about fairness. Among the 81 disciples, other than the 9 who are grade 1 illusory sword disciples, the rest are all drawing sword disciples. Xiao Hua is able to fight against Qin Jian. I believe that against a few grade 1 illusory sword disciples, he won't be at a disadvantage, right? Don't listen to his nonsense." Fairy Hong Xia pulled Xiao Hua's arm and said, "He said that there are 81 disciples. Who knows how many there are in the array? There might even be illusory sword disciples." Xiao Hua looked at Qi Qingyi, then at Qingzhen and Qingjian, who had been silent all this while. He seemed to be thinking about something. After all, Xiao Hua had fought with Ji Yi of the 7 Spirit Mountain before. He had a very good impression of the magnanimous Ji Yi, and he also had a good impression of the 7 Spirit Mountain. In addition, Qi Qingyi and the other 3 were only covering their tracks and didn't take advantage of the fact that Li Zongbao and the others were immersed in the beautiful scenery to make a sudden move. Xiao Hua already believed most of Qi Qingyi's words. How many people can the Brahma Pagoda's Great Array formation hold? Xiao Hua suddenly asked. 360 people. Chi Chingy hesitated for a moment before replying, however, I heard that this isn't the limit of the Brahma Pagoda's array. As for the maximum number of people, I'm not too sure. How can this Xiao believe that your secret technique can refine spirit artifacts? Xiao Hua asked again. When Chi Chingy saw this, he was overjoyed. He pointed at the small sword floating in front of him, and the small sword flew back to Xiao Hua. He said, in order to show my 7 Spirit Mountain sincerity, there is a short description of the secret technique inside. I don't know if you can take a look at it. Alright, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the flying sword fell into his hand. After he immersed his divine telekinesis in it and carefully examined it for a moment, Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and the flying sword fell into his space. Good. You have guts. Chi Chingy's face was once again filled with astonishment. He raised his right thumb and said, You are indeed worthy of being called the terrifying phoenix. This chi is truly inferior to you. There's no need to flatter this Xiao. Xiao Hua clapped his hand, took out the sword pouch, and waved it in front of Chi Chingy. He said, the sword pouch is right here. If this Xiao can't break the array, then this sword pouch will belong to the 7 Spirit Mountain. Good. Chi Chingy clapped his hands and said, This chi will immediately return and set up the Brahma Pagoda's great array formation. I will quietly wait for you to break the array. After he finished speaking, Chi Chingy did not say anything else. He quickly led Qing Ming and the rest into the distance. Darling Xiao, when there were sword cultivator disciples just now, Fairy Hong Xia did not ask much. After Chi Chingy left, she hurriedly said, Won't it be fine if we don't go? Their Brahma Pagoda's great array formation has 9 illusory sword first-grade swordsmen and 72 drawing sword swordsmen. You and I together only have 4 people. How can we be a match for their array formation? Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua and did not ask anything. Sigh, since it's an order from the transforming swordsman. If you and I don't go through this sword array, how can we pass through the Huan country? Xiao Hua sighed and said, Even if we hide from the 7 Spirit Mountain, there are still the 8 Spirit Mountain and the 6 Spirit Mountain behind us. We will never have an end. Why don't we take this opportunity to break this bullshit Brahma Pagoda's great array formation in one fell swoop? That's not all. Li Zongbao added, Although I can't see what's happening 100 miles away, since Chi Chingy has already said so, perhaps they didn't plan to invite us to 7 Spirit Mountain at all. Perhaps they've already set up a large formation 100 miles away and are waiting for us to arrive. In such a situation, junior sister, do you think we should fight or hide? Of course we have to fight. Fairy Hong Xia pondered for a moment before she raised her voice and said, Since we are here, we are the representatives of Dao's sect. Even if our lives are in danger, we must go. We must not disgrace Dao's sect. That's right. We did not retreat in fear when facing hundreds of thousands of swordsmen. There is no reason for us to be scared off by the 7 Spirit Mountain. Xiao Mao shouted. Save it, Xiao Hua said with a smile, don't think too highly of yourself. We are just Foundation Establishment disciples. We have not reached such a stage. Xiao Hua. Fairy Hong Xia waved her hand and pinched Xiao Hua's arm. She said reproachfully, We are all encouraging you. We know that your cultivation is the highest, so there is no reason for you to discourage us. No. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically and pointed into the distance. The 7 Spirit Mountain has already planned this. They know that we will not go to the 7 Spirit Mountain. They have already set up a great array in front of us and are waiting for us to walk into their trap. Do you think we need to go to such a place where we know there is a trap? Then just now. Didn't you already agree? Fairy Hong Xia was a little dumbfounded. Sword cultivators are just our enemies. Moreover, we are now in a tiger's den. There is no need to be so trusting. Even Li Zongbao said quietly, what Xiao Hua said just now was just a temporary measure. As the saying goes, a real man knows when to stretch and when to shrink. This is the moment. That might not work. Fairy Hongxia came to her senses and nodded slightly. However, when she looked into the distance, she saw a pale white land and a vast expanse of black ash in the distance. Since the Seven Spirit Mountain can send 4 illusory sword sect disciples here, there must be people in other places as well. If their disciples are setting up an array in front of us, there must be disciples in other places as well. Didn't Qi Qingyi say before? This Brahma Pagoda array only needs 81 disciples to set up. They must have sent no less than 800 disciples here, right? After all, that communication talisman was sent by a sword transformation swordsman. Che, so what if they have 8,000 disciples? Xiao Hua sneered, if we want to run. Can they catch up? Darling Xiao, Fairy Hongxia looked at Xiao Hua and said word by word, I know that you are a rogue cultivator. Before you entered the Imperial Thunder sect, you had to go through many hardships. Many times, you had to face enemies that you could not face. Therefore, when you are facing enemies, most of the time, you would first consider your escape route and not think about how to face them. This kind of strategy, I can't say that it is bad. As Fairy Hongxia spoke, she looked at Xiao Hua's expression and went straight to the point, this kind of thinking. If you were a rogue cultivator, a low-level cultivator, it would work. However, Xiao Lang, take a look. I, Senior Brother Li, and Junior Brother Xiao are all famous Foundation establishment cultivators in the Dao sect. However, we know in our hearts that even if the 3 of us were to join forces, we would still be no match for you. You, Xiao Hua, are no longer the rogue cultivator from back then. You are a hero who has experienced the Great Dao Sword War. Sooner or later, you will become an important senior in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. You are already a high-level cultivator. You can no longer have the thought of retreating after a battle and protecting yourself. Sooner or later, you will be the master of a sect. This master's bearing will start from today. It had to be said that women were always outwardly oriented. Although Fairy Red Dawn had not yet held a dual cultivation ceremony with Xiao Hua, she was already planning for her husband. Perhaps Xiao Hua did not think too much about it, but in Fairy Red Dawn's heart, she had already begun to draw up a blueprint for his future. Fairy Hongxia could have said these words through voice transmission or in private. However, she knew that with Xiao Hua's lazy personality, he might not listen to her. If she said too much, Xiao Hua might even get sick of it. Now that she said it in front of Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, it would make Xiao Hua lose face. However, Li Zongbao was someone that Xiao Hua respected, and Xiao Mao was Xiao Hua's brother. Their words should be more likely to enter Xiao Hua's ears than her. This was also Fairy Hongxia's good intentions and exhaustion. That's right. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said these words. Previously, Master kept saying them in my ears. Although I did not mind, I had no choice but to obey. Now that I heard Junior Sister say it again, I really understand Master's painstaking efforts. This bearing is not something one is born with, nor is it something that can be born with the increase of one's cultivation level. It still needs to be nurtured in the details. Previously, I agreed with Junior Brother Zhao's escape plan. Although it was a wise move, it was harmful to the cultivation of a master's bearing. Moving forward and being worshipped by the cultivators, this is what a master should do. That's right. Big brother. Xiao Mao was also excited. He clapped his hands and praised. Then, he flew to Xiao Hua's side and said, "You will definitely be a cultivator on the same level as the Imperial Thunder Sect's Palace Master. Your actions are the role model of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." What senior sister said is also from the bottom of her heart. "We can hide today, but the days ahead are long. We still have to pass through Huan country and the millions of Meng Mountains." Chapter 2761. Hee, alright, that's enough. Xiao Hua's stern face revealed a smile as he looked at Fairy Hongxia, Li Zongbao, and Xiao Mao. He said, "I know what you're talking about. I'm just afraid that the Seven Spirit Mountains formation is too powerful. As for this Xiao..." Not to mention the Seven Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda formation with 81 people, even if it's a formation with 360 people, why would this Xiao be afraid? Since Big Brother isn't afraid, I'm not afraid either. Xiao Mao patted his chest and said, "We've all seen Lu Ruochang's square sword formation. Why would we be afraid of this Brahma Pagoda formation? Alright. Since that's the case, we'll go and break the formation." Xiao Hua waved his hand. Go, go, go. Li Zongbao also pointed forward. "Let them know how powerful I am." Xiao Hua smiled as he looked at Fairy Hongxia. His heart was overflowing with tenderness. If he was alone, he wouldn't be afraid of a formation of 360 people, let alone 81 people. He would definitely go and give it a try. Even if it was the old man who transformed into a sword, Xiao Hua wouldn't be afraid of him at all. There was no need to be so respectful. However, he understood that his responsibility for this trip to Huan country and millions of Meng Mountains was not small. Fairy Hongxia had to go. If she was in any danger, he would definitely keep her in his space even if it meant exposing his secret. As for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, these two burdens, he didn't know how to deal with them. He could only find a safe way to proceed. However, he didn't expect Fairy Hongxia to refute his idea. Fairy Hongxia was worried that Xiao Hua would be angry. However, Xiao Hua's heart was filled with joy. How could he be angry? Fairy Hongxia's plan for herself showed that Fairy Hongxia treated herself as Xiao Hua's wife and not a disciple of Liu Yang's Kai family. Dui Qiming probably treated Cui Hongshan the same way. Xiao Hua was happy. At the same time, he thought of his junior brother in Myriad Thunder Valley. If that's the case, my plan will be useful. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was shocked. Cui Hongshan and Dui Qiming's words suddenly appeared in his mind. Li, on the other hand, is making rapid progress. She's already at the 6th level of qi refining, right? Now that he's grown up, he rarely returns to the Myriad Thunder Valley. Sometimes, when he comes back, he'll stay in his cave and meditate. This little brother also rarely sees him. 6th layer of qi refining. A few days ago, I heard from eldest senior brother that Li has already reached the 7th layer of qi refining. Well, it's been a while. For your husband, how can I tell the difference between the 5th, 6th, and 7th levels of qi refining? Damn it. I didn't pay attention to it that day, but there's a hidden meaning in their words. It was only now that Xiao Hua came to his senses. Li, when I saw you that day, you seemed to have already reached the 6th or 7th layer of the aura refining realm. How many years has it been? There's no reason you're still in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, right? Presumably, this little fellow had some kind of fortuitous encounter that allowed him to conceal his cultivation. They must have thought that Li learned some secret technique from me, right? Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he recalled Xiang Zhili's expression when he asked him what kind of divine ability he wanted that day. Husband. Fairy Hongxia saw the strange expression on Xiao Hua's face and hurriedly transmitted her voice. What I said, don't be angry. Eldest senior brother Li and junior brother Xiao are not outsiders. He, my wife. Xiao Hua held Fairy Hongxiao's hand and transmitted his voice back. Your husband knows that I'm of low birth and don't have the self-restraint of a disciple from a cultivation family. The quality of this magic weapon is far superior to that of ordinary magic weapons. Actually, when Qi Qingyi mentioned the extreme magnetic ray, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. The extreme magnetic ray was one of the necessary items in the refining method of the spirit-exterminating vital ray that Zhang Qingxiao had given him. Although Xiao Hua had only glanced at it briefly, he still remembered the name. He was still wondering what the extreme magnetic ray was. He didn't expect it to be found in the extreme north of the Huan country. How do we collect the extreme magnetic ray? Xiao Hua asked. Junior brother Xiao, don't think too much about it now. Li Zongbao laughed. Those who can travel to the extreme north are all nascent soul stage and separating soul stage seniors. Moreover, the extreme magnetic ray is very strange. If you don't have a magic weapon that can restrain the extreme magnetic ray, even if you go there, it's impossible to get the extreme magnetic ray. So it's like this. Xiao Hua still didn't give up. Then, which senior of my Taoist sect has this magic weapon? It seems to be the Kunlun sect. Li Zongbao pondered for a moment and said, the Kunlun sect was established the earliest and has a long history. They seem to have a magic weapon called the two-winged spectroscope, which is refined using the extreme magnetic ray. Senior brother, which senior is also from the Kunlun sect? That's not it. Li Zongbao shook his head and said, of course there are many seniors who went to the extreme north. My Utopia faction also has some. However, only the Kunlun sect can successfully collect the extreme magnetic ray and refine it into a magic weapon. Kunlun sect. Xiao Hua looked pensive and immediately thought of the frost bamboo. However, Li Zongbao obviously misunderstood Xiao Hua and hurriedly said in a low voice, Junior brother Xiao, don't look down on the Kunlun sect. Although the Kunlun sect didn't have any powerful disciples in this sword battle, and even martial uncle Yuan Zhongyu had a mediocre performance, he was hiding his strength and biding his time. The foundation of the Kunlun sect is far from what we've seen. According to Master, even arrogant sects like your country of Shi Shanghua sect and Qiqiao sect may not be able to compete with the Kunlun sect. The Kunlun sect is so powerful. Xiao Hua had never been to Mount Kunlun in the country of Lian, so he naturally didn't know the situation of the Kunlun sect. Seeing Li Zongbao so serious about this matter, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Yes, there are many cultivation sects on the Xiaoyu continent, but there are only a few that can really be in charge. These cultivation sects have also risen and fallen with the passage of time, but if there's one that can really stand tall, it's the Kunlun sect. Li Zongbao said in a low voice. Big brother. At this moment, Xiao Mao opened his mouth and pointed into the distance. If we fly forward for another 10 miles, there's an ice field. I've already seen it. There are hundreds of sword cultivators waiting for us there. Qi Qingyi is among them. Then, he pointed to the left and said with a cautious expression, there are also hundreds of swordsmen over there, blocking the way to Mount Mang. Just as Big Brother expected, if we don't break through the Seven Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda formation, the disciples of the Seven Spirit Mountain may not let us go. Good. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao and said, we'll fly slowly, and the preparations are almost done. How about it, Senior Brother Li, you still want to lead the way? Good. Li Zongbao laughed and clapped his hand. A 1-foot-long ring appeared and said, let the sword cultivators of the Seven Spirit Mountain see how powerful I am. Oh. Senior Brother Li, where's your immortal piercing whip? Xiao Hua was surprised to see Li Zongbao take out a ring. The immortal piercing whip was destroyed in the spirit-devouring formation of the sword cultivators. Li Zongbao's face showed a trace of pity. I don't have a suitable magic treasure, so I'll use Master's Yin Yang ring for the time being. Oh, the spirit-devouring formation. Xiaohua immediately thought of the few spirit-devouring bugs in the sword pouch and asked, can't it be repaired? Maybe it can, maybe it can't. Li Zongbao said desolately, even if it can be repaired, I'm afraid it won't be the same immortal piercing whip as before. Alright, then. Senior Brother Lake should follow behind me. As he spoke, Xiaohua released his divine sense and looked ahead. Huh. Xiao Mao. Your divine sense can see more than 10 miles away. Li Zongbao naturally released his divine sense and suddenly realized something. He looked at Xiao Mao with some astonishment. Xiao Mao's face showed a trace of unnaturalness, and he said with a smile, yes, my divine sense is stronger than ordinary cultivators. Now I can see more than 10 miles away. That's right. Xiaohua didn't notice this before. His divine sense was stronger than ordinary cultivators, and he also had Buddhist awareness. When Xiao Mao said it just now, he didn't care at all. Now that he heard Li Zongbao's astonishment, he understood. Ordinary cultivators in the late Foundation establishment stage could only see more than 10 miles away with their divine sense. Xiao Mao, who was just in the middle Foundation establishment stage, could see more than 10 miles away. The strength of his divine sense was not ordinary. The loneliness that he couldn't dispel all this time seemed to be gradually disappearing. The four of them flew at a leisurely pace for nearly the time it took to eat a meal. In the sky in front of them, in the white dawn, there were about 100 swordsmen wearing the same sword attire standing in an orderly manner. These swordsmen were all strong and healthy people. Their stature was almost uniform. Qi Qingyi was standing in front of these disciples. Seeing that Xiaohua and the others were actually smiling and flying over without the slightest bit of panic, he was very surprised. At the same time, the slight delay he had when he received the message from the swordsman had already disappeared. You really keep your word. Qi Qingyi flew a few feet forward and said with a smile. Xiaohua was no longer hiding behind Li Zongbao like he was during the Dao sword battle. He also flew forward and said with a smile, there are disciples of the Seven Spirit Mountain all around. I can't go anywhere else even if I want to. I can only keep coming here. People of the sword domain have always been hospitable. I was afraid that you would misunderstand my hospitality, so I wanted to invite you over. Qi Qingyi's expression didn't change as he replied naturally. Xiaohua didn't waste time with him. He pointed his finger and said, is this the Brahma Pagoda formation of your Seven Spirit Mountain? You are really impatient. Qi Qingyi shook his head and said, the Brahma Pagoda formation of my Seven Spirit Mountain is a famous formation in the sword domain. How can it be so simple? Oh. What? What do you mean? Xiaohua was a little confused. If you don't set up the formation, how can we break it? You should hurry up. We still have to hurry. Ha ha ha, you are really interesting. Qi Qingyi laughed. You can still be so calm in the face of my Seven Spirit Mountain's Brahma Pagoda formation. This is the first time I have seen you. My Seven Spirit Mountain will not hold it against you. As for the other sword sects, I don't dare to represent them. Xiaohua saw that Qi Qingyi had misunderstood and knew that he thought he was stalling and wanted to finish the job in one fell swoop. However, he didn't explain and said, that's all I have to say. Don't blame me for being ruthless in the future. Alright, I will definitely pass on your words. Please, Senior Huaijin. Qi Qingyi nodded and stepped aside. The 100 or so swordsmen behind him moved at the same time, revealing a passage. However, the 100 or so swordsmen's faces were no longer as calm as before. They had all heard Xiaohua and Qi Qingyi's words. Xiaohua's current cultivation was only around the middle stage of foundation establishment, which was equivalent to a third or fourth stage swordsman. He wasn't too far off from these swordsmen's cultivation. However, according to Xiaohua's words, he didn't put them in his eyes at all. Therefore, each and every one of them glared angrily at him. Their gazes were like flying swords that pierced Xiaohua full of holes. Xiaohua really didn't put these swordsmen in his eyes. He swaggered and flew in. Li Zongbao and the others were different from Xiaohua. Their faces were filled with vigilance as they released their divine senses. Only then did they follow Xiaohua through the gap between the swordsmen. At this moment, the 100 or so swordsmen were still in neat rows, forming a square formation. Xiaohua and the others had entered a corner of the square. In fact, the entire square was already covered by Xiaohua's Buddhist sense. There were no strange fluctuations at all. It was no different from ordinary swordsmen standing in the air. Chapter 2763. Of course, these 7 Spirit Mountain swordsmen were weapon cultivators. Their bodies flickered with a faint brilliance. The brilliance circled around them and swam up and down. When Xiaohua and the others entered, the rhythm of the flickering light and swam was somewhat chaotic. But as Xiaohua went deeper, the brightness and darkness of the brilliance began to converge. Even the rhythm of the brilliance began to synchronize. Oh. So that's how it is. Although Xiaohua was smiling, his heart was as clear as a mirror. Not to mention that the 7 Spirit Mountain had received the order to transform into swords, they would not act rashly. Even if they did not transform into swords, if the 7 Spirit Mountain wanted to meet him, they would definitely not use some sloppy array. Since they dared to set up a sword array, then, they must have the confidence to kill him in one strike. The combined attack of 100 weapon cultivators. I'm afraid it's powerful. This young master was exaggerating just now. Xiaohua's mind whirled. I shouldn't have let Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and my wife enter the array. This first strike is not easy to receive. After the first strike, this young master will deal a heavy blow. While Xiaohua was thinking, he had already arrived at the center of the array. This was a space about 100 feet in size. It was also square. Are you ready, sir? Qi Qingyi's voice came from outside the weapon cultivators. It sounded like a reminder from fellow disciples who were competing. This Qi is going to activate the array. Xiaohua looked around and transmitted a few words to Fairy Hongxia. He raised his voice and said, This Xiao and the others are ready. Sir, bring it on. Xiaohua's voice was also gentle. It was impossible to tell that this was a fight between cultivators and swordsmen. His tone was even more indifferent than when he first entered the Thunder Arena. All right. Be careful, sire, the formation. Before Qi Qingyi could finish speaking, his voice trailed off. The weapon cultivators around Xiaohua and the others simultaneously flashed with a beautiful brilliance. This brilliance was like a rising sun, illuminating the nearby night sky. Moreover, this sun was actually rising slowly, rapidly covering an area of several hundred feet around Xiaohua and the others. Even Qi Qingyi's words couldn't be heard. Damn, this great array is powerful. Xiaohua felt that his divine sense and Buddhist consciousness were also being blocked, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. His entire body flashed with faint lightning, and his entire body rapidly rushed up, rushing towards the gap above his head that hadn't closed yet. Unfortunately, it was at this moment that Qi Qingyi's voice rang out from above again. Sir, the Great Formation hasn't been activated yet. According to our previous agreement, you can't attack yet. Humph. Why would this young master care so much about you? Xiaohua sneered and stretched out his hand. A rumbling sound of thunder came from between his hands. This was a spell that he had been thinking about ever since he couldn't summon lightning in the Blood Drop Paradise. Now that he suddenly used it, he was still a little rusty. "Your Excellency, please calm down." Qingyi's voice was still filled with concern. "If you don't abide by our previous agreement, not only will you not be able to obtain the Spirit Tool's secret refining technique, the 7th Spirit Mountain will also report this matter to Senior Huajian. If Senior Huajian were to personally take action. Would you find it interesting?" "Well." Xiao Hua hesitated after hearing Qingyi's threat. However, while he was hesitating, the gap above his head sped up. "You dare to trick this young master." Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. His hands moved, and with a crackling sound, a few bolts of lightning appeared between his hands, striking towards that crack. His body shot out like a sharp arrow once again. "Ha, this Qi is thinking for your Excellency." Qingyi laughed loudly, and his voice disappeared again. Rumble. The lightning struck the gap that hadn't closed yet, and a huge sound rang out. However, wherever the lightning struck, the brilliance on the weapon cultivator's body became even more intense. Furthermore, this brilliance continued to spread outwards and only stopped after it had spread for several dozen feet. Just as the brilliance returned to its original state, Xiao Hua could clearly see that within the brilliance, in the gaps between the weapon cultivators, the lightning was gradually dissipating with a sizzling sound. Damn it, the 7th Spirit Mountain came prepared. Xiao Hua understood. They must know that this young master's phoenix celestial body can attract lightning, so they set up the Great Brahma Pagoda Formation. This great formation has the ability to avoid lightning, and all the lightning can only concentrate on the gaps between the disciples who set up the formation, and can't directly hit the disciples who set up the formation. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the radiance above his head had already merged. Streams of flowing radiance flowed back and forth within the space of several hundred meters like water ripples, covering the figures of the 81 weapon cultivators who set up the formation. Even Xiao Hua's divine sense was blocked within this space, and could no longer penetrate it. It seemed like this was another blood drop paradise. Buzz, just as Xiao Hua was about to rush towards the weapon cultivator closest to him, a huge rumbling sound rang out from the radiance all around him. Not good. I'm afraid this is the first attack. Xiao Hua thought to himself. He didn't have time to attack the weapon cultivator closest to him, and his figure rapidly descended. However, he still shouted, "Quickly set up the innate primordial water." Yes. At the same time, he clapped his hand and held the wishful steel staff in his hand. Like a sturgeon swimming against the current, he rushed towards the huge force. The wishful steel staff in his hand also struck out. Boom! What a huge shock. The entire space was shaking. That huge force was actually caught by Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. Xiao Hua's figure didn't even move at all. Like a pine tree, he stood majestically. "Do you want to come again?" Xiao Hua shouted. Following the direction of the force, he rushed up. The wishful steel staff was raised high, and he casually hit a place in the array. Boom! The brilliance was annihilated with the fall of Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. There seemed to be no stagnation. At the place where the wishful steel staff fell, a weapon refiner disciple who had gradually transformed into a magic weapon was also hit out of the array by Xiao Hua. The weapon refiner disciple's body slowly recovered. He looked at his figure that was flying further and further away in disbelief. He tried his best to control his balance. Just as Xiao Hua turned to look at the weapon refiner next to him who was hit and was about to raise the wishful steel staff again, he heard the voice of Hongsha Fairy. Xiaohua's divine sense swept back and saw that Hongxia Fairy's ice phoenix Dharma body could no longer bear the heavy pressure and attack of the Brahma Pagoda's array. It had already been absorbed into her body, and the innate primordial water's defense was also restrained by the imprisonment. It was getting thinner and thinner, and it could no longer be maintained. As for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, they had already rushed out of the primordial water and took out their respective magic weapons. The magic weapons flashed with brilliance and emitted a strange sound as they attacked the weapon refiner disciple closest to them. However, the weapon refiners were now all in the divine transformation stage. Each of them was like a magic weapon. Although the power of a single magic weapon might not be comparable to Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, under the Brahma Pagoda's array, the yin and yang rings and the heaven and earth rings were restrained by the magic weapons. They were always hit and were unable to hurt the weapon refiners of the 7 spirit mountains. Li Zongbao gave her a look and transmitted his voice, "Junior sister, don't be impatient. You know junior brother Zhao's cultivation better than me. He could have come out just now, but he stayed in the formation in order to hold Xiao Mao back. This Brahma Pagoda Great Formation is indeed powerful, but I feel that it is impossible to keep junior brother Xiao here. You and I will just watch from the sidelines." Okay, Fairy Hongxia was actually worried. When Li Zongbao said this, she immediately realized what kind of person Xiaohua was. He was a fierce person who had scared Lu Ruochang away. How could he be trapped in this Brahma Pagoda Great Formation? If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to kill and didn't want to reveal his true cultivation, what was there for her to worry about? Before the Brahma Pagoda Great Formation was really activated, Xiaohua was holding the wishful staff and kicking the weapon cultivator disciples outside the Great Formation. Then, he heard a rumbling sound coming from the space behind him. Xiaohua scanned it with his divine sense and couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that Xiaohua had been using the Kunlun mirror to emit a frosty air. During this period of time, it had already condensed more than a dozen places in the Great Formation into crystals. The Great Formation emitted a fierce brilliance to repair these crystals. However, at the same time, Xiaohua had kicked more than a dozen weapon cultivator disciples out of the Great Formation. All of a sudden, there were less than 30 disciples in the Great Formation. Although the entire Great Formation was overflowing with brilliance to repair these gaps, the positions of the 81 weapon cultivator disciples were fixed. Right behind Xiaohua, a rather large gap had already appeared. With a single glance, one could see that there were roughly 20 or so empty spots for weapon refinement disciples. This Brahma Pagoda Great Formation actually sent the disciples behind Xiaohua to Xiaohua. However, because the weapon cultivators in the Great Formation were different, they had no choice but to reveal a slight flaw in the distance from Xiaohua. Of course, this flaw was only revealed slightly. With a rumbling sound, the brilliance quickly repaired it. Ha ha ha. This Great Formation has been broken by us. Senior brotherly, let's go. We'll rush out of the Great Formation. Xiaohua laughed loudly. His figure swayed and flew towards the gap. Xiaohua's flying speed was so fast. Although Li Zongbao, Fairy Hongxia and the others were in the center of the Great Formation and were very close to the gap, when Li Zongbao and the other two were not even halfway to the gap, Xiaohua had already swept over their heads. Swoosh, splendor flashed rapidly in the gap. Pa, 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 sounds rang out. Like building a wall, the great array once again drew weapons from all over and piled them up in the gap. It seemed to be making up for this gap. Fight, how could Xiaohua allow the Great Formation to be repaired again? With a point of his finger, the Kunlun mirror that had already completed its task flashed with an earthy yellow brilliance once again. A powerful surge of magic power condensed in the earth pillar surged towards the gap, immediately diluting the brilliance in the cave. The paw 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 sounds immediately became much softer. Rumble. After the brilliance of the great formation was diluted, it shook violently once again. A powerful suction force was generated from all around the great formation. Not only were the weapon cultivators who were sent flying by Xiao Hua pulled back by the huge force, Fairy Hongxia, Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao who had already rushed to the gap were also pulled back. Get out! Xiao Hua was ranked third. With a wave of his Daoist robe, heaven and earth in the sleeves was unleashed. In an instant, it enveloped Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao. With a casual push, it cut off the suction force of the great formation. Their bodies became light, and like arrows, they shot out of the rapidly shrinking gap. After sending off the two of them, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and used another heaven and earth in the sleeves to grab Xiao Mao. There was no other way. Xiao Mao's cultivation was the weakest among the four of them. Previously, he was the closest to Xiao Hua, but was also far away from the gap. Even when he used all his magic power to fly in this direction, there was still a huge gap. But just as Xiao Hua grabbed Xiao Mao, the rumbling sound beside him became even louder. The brilliance of the Kunlun mirror was covered by the brilliance of the great formation, and the gap was quickly repaired. Damn it, you can't bully people like this, alright? Xiao Hua couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that every time they met with danger together, it would always end up like this. Attack! Xiao Hua did not hesitate. He once again activated the Kunlun mirror and was about to launch an attack. At this moment, the entire space emitted a strange sound, as if it was about to destroy the heavens and the earth. The entire space quickly turned upside down and vibrated rapidly. An indescribable, seemingly irresistible wave of energy was produced in the entire space, enveloping Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao within. Even the brilliance of the Kunlun mirror was restrained by the rapidly reverberating waves in the space, unable to attack. Instead, it slowly descended and flew above Xiao Hua's head. Chapter 2765. Big Brother. Seeing this, Xiao Mao seemed a little ashamed. He looked at Xiao Hua and wanted to say something, but found it hard to open his mouth. Hee, don't say anything. Xiao Hua laughed. I didn't plan to go out at all. I wanted to send you out first so I could harm these weapon cultivators. Now, you're in for a treat. Take a good look. Yes. Xiao Mao knew that Xiao Hua was comforting him. If he wanted to break the array himself, he wouldn't have let the three of them in. Just like what Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao saw from the outside, the entire array changed abruptly. Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao were dumbfounded as the array shook violently. However, they were even more shocked than Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia. This was because, in their eyes, the array became bigger and bigger. The space in the pagoda grew from 100 feet to a few hundred feet. Of course, if it wasn't the array that became bigger, then it was Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao who became smaller. As for who was bigger and who was smaller, Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao who were in the array naturally couldn't tell. This is the real Brahma Pagoda array. Just like Fairy Hongxia, when Xiao Hua saw the pagoda-shaped space within the Brahma Pagoda, he muttered to himself in his heart. It was the 81 magic artifacts that formed the entire Brahma Pagoda. Wah, an inexplicable sound came from the top of the pagoda. It slowly descended and reverberated in the entire pagoda space. See, Xiao Mao frowned first, as if a trace of impatience had appeared in his heart. Oh. What's wrong? Xiao Hua didn't feel that there was anything strange about the sound and looked at Xiao Mao strangely. This sound is very irritating in my ears. Xiao Mao looked at Xiao Hua and answered honestly. And there's a kind of impulse to let go of everything. Let go of everything. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. It feels like everything you do is meaningless. Let go of everything and surrender. Xiao Mao explained. This is the sound attack of weapon cultivators. Damn it, it's really powerful. I see. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. However, this sound didn't have the effect that Xiao Mao had described. I'm afraid it's because of the difference in cultivation level. Xiao Hua didn't think too much about it. He pointed his finger, and the Kunlun mirror once again flashed with brilliance. The entire mirror faced upwards, and with a heshua sound, a green brilliance several feet in size shot out from the Kunlun mirror, shooting straight towards the surface of the pagoda that was flashing with a faint white light. The green brilliance shot straight up, and just as it flew up 1 foot, the misty green threads of light began to transform, and thick green trees began to appear in the brilliance. With a rumbling sound, the green trees collided with each other like mountains and seas of trees. They swayed and collided with the Brahma pagoda. Following the loud roar, the entire pagoda shook violently. The faint Sanskrit chants actually began to appear intermittently amidst the roar. All right. When Xiao Hua saw that the Kunlun mirror was effective, he was overjoyed. He activated the magic power in his body, and rays of green brilliance unceasingly surged out. These rays of brilliance struck the same direction of the Brahma pagoda, causing the entire pagoda to shake incessantly. It seemed like it was about to collapse. Buzz, a milky white brilliance, along with a kind of intense fluctuation, appeared at the top of the pagoda. It covered the bottom of the pagoda, and scattered the brilliance of Xiao Hua's Kunlun mirror. And wherever the brilliance went, the shaking of the Brahma pagoda gradually stopped. With just these. Xiao Hua sneered and instructed Xiao Mao, you will fall to the bottom of the great array, and see how I will break it. Yes. Xiao Mao knew that he couldn't help, so he released the universe ring to protect himself and flew down. However, as he flew, he slightly turned his head back, as if he was worried about Xiao Hua. Rise! When Xiao Hua saw that Xiao Mao had flown far away, he shouted loudly. He held the Kunlun mirror with both hands, and the tricolored brilliance of the Kunlun mirror soared into the sky, like a waterfall, and struck the top of the Brahma pagoda. Repulse! Just before the tricolored brilliance rushed into the Brahma pagoda, a muffled sound came from the top of the pagoda. At the same time, countless rays of white brilliance emerged from all over the Brahma pagoda like fireflies, and gathered at the top of the pagoda. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic humanoid figure was formed in front of the tricolored brilliance. This humanoid figure was 3 zhang tall, and its facial features were somewhat blurry. The upper body was slightly clearer, and it had 2 arms and a body. However, the lower body was still formed by the white brilliance, and it didn't transform. When this humanoid figure appeared, it immediately clenched its huge fist and smashed towards the tricolored brilliance of the Kunlun mirror. Boom! With a loud sound, the tricolored brilliance was actually destroyed by the fist. Although the scattered brilliance hit the Brahma pagoda again, it was obvious that the attack on the Brahma pagoda had weakened by a lot, and it didn't pose a threat. Artifact Spirit. Seeing the birth of the gigantic spirit, Xiao Hua was shocked at first, but then he came to a realization. Those specks of brilliance that were like fireflies from before were the artifact spirits of every artifact cultivator's artifact. These artifact spirits were extremely weak, and these 81 artifact spirits were gathered together with the help of the Brahma pagoda's great formation, giving birth to an even larger artifact spirit. This artifact spirit was equivalent to the combined power of 81 swordsmen. Outside the Brahma pagoda, Qi Qingyi stood at the top of the pagoda. He could see clearly from the outside, and the expression on his face was extremely ugly. He really didn't expect that Xiao Hua's spiritual power could be comparable to 81 artifact cultivators. He also understood in his heart that within this Brahma pagoda array, Xiaohua couldn't fake it. He could only fight the gigantic spirit head-on. What was even more unexpected was that Xiaohua actually had a demonic artifact, and this demonic artifact could even hit the artifact spirit. Could it be that? Qi Qingyi raised his hand, somewhat hesitant. Just as Qi Qingyi was thinking for a moment, the gigantic spirit's arms had been completely defeated by Xiaohua, and all the scattered artifact spirits had gathered at the top of the Brahma Pagoda. The Kunlun mirror was still fierce, and from time to time, it attacked the Brahma Pagoda, which had lost its host. However, fortunately, the gigantic spirit's arms were just a formality. He could attack from all over his body, which was why he was able to block Xiaohua. This kind of clumsy artifact spirit tempering method is only a so-so. Xiaohua's figure was far from being comparable to the clumsy gigantic spirit. The wishful staff could always defeat the gigantic spirit's body. Xiaohua couldn't help but scoff at this. When Xiaohua flew to the back of the gigantic spirit, he roared, "You go to hell." Immediately, the wishful staff was raised high and hit the gigantic spirit's back extremely heavily. Although the gigantic spirit's body was huge and the wishful staff was only 3 feet in size, as the wishful staff hit, there was a loud rumbling sound. The gigantic spirit's back collapsed rapidly, and a fist-sized black hole was created by the wishful staff. Moreover, this black hole did not heal, and then it expanded again. It was like a beast's mouth, swallowing the entire gigantic spirit. Naturally, after the artifact spirits that formed the gigantic spirit's body were swallowed by this black hole, they scattered and could no longer form the gigantic spirit. They flew to the top of the pagoda. Chapter 2766. This giant spirit is the same as the Brahma Pagoda. Although there are only 81 weapon spirits, the flashing brilliance can connect together and actually form a Dharma idol that is several zhang tall. This 7-spirit mountain still has some foundation. Xiaohua put away the wishful staff and narrowed his eyes as he looked at the top of the pagoda. He thought to himself, if this young master's phoenix celestial body was still here, wouldn't it be several times more powerful than this bullshit weapon spirit? Damn it, this won't do. This young master wants to see the heavenly law embodiment technique of the devil world and see if I can cultivate another Dharma idol. Shua, seeing that the 81 weapon spirits had all gathered at the top of the pagoda, all the weapon spirits began to boil again. An indescribable fluctuation came from the top of the pagoda. Obviously, the top of the pagoda was the center of the entire Brahma Pagoda's array. Woo, a strange sound like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves came from the top of the pagoda. Then, a cold wind blew across the cliff, and the sharp sound did not stop. What kind of trick is this? Xiaohua frowned. A little bit of dark green color came out from the top of the pagoda. Suddenly, this dark green color lit up all the weapon spirits, and the brilliance of the weapon spirits flashed rapidly. Woo! Another extremely resounding sound came. All the weapon spirits suddenly turned into swords. The 1-foot-long brilliance was like a flying sword, and with a tail behind it, it came crashing down. Ha 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 ha! In the end, they are still sword cultivators from the Huan country. They are still unable to break free from the shackles of sword cultivation. Xiaohua laughed and pointed his finger at the Kunlun mirror. The tricolored brilliance on the mirror spread out and blocked Xiaohua's body, blocking the entire lower half of the Brahma Pagoda. However, contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, when these flying swords fell in front of the tricolored brilliance, they suddenly accelerated and rushed through the brilliance like meteors falling from the sky. The defense of the Kunlun mirror was actually ineffective against these flying swords. Ah! Why is that? Xiaohua was stupefied, but soon after, he was greatly shocked. He also encountered this situation when he killed Qin Jian. Weren't these the soul swords used by the sword cultivators of the Huan country? Not good. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. As he cried out in alarm, the soul strands within the mysterious dark cloud quickly rushed out from the Lao's soul mark between his eyebrows. Every strand of soul rippled violently as they formed a strange net, blocking Xiao Hua's path. Woo, woo, a series of shrill sounds rang out, as if a whirlwind had been set off in the entire Brahma Pagoda's great array. The dozens of soul swords were actually blocked by Xiao Hua's soul threads. They were like flying insects that had fallen into a spider's web, flapping up and down, but they were unable to break free. As for Xiao Hua, it was clear that he had reached his limit to resist the dozens of soul swords by himself. His glabella felt a sharp pain as he tried his best to block the soul swords. If it was said that he had the will to destroy these dozens of soul swords, he was still lacking in strength. But at this moment, Xiao Hua's figure appeared, and a panicked voice sounded, "Big brother, oh no! Someone slipped through the net." With a sweep of his divine sense, Xiao Hua understood what was going on. Although he had used his soul strands to block several dozen soul swords, there were still close to 10 soul swords that had passed through his soul strands, and were heading towards Xiao Mao, who was at the bottom of the pagoda. Go! Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. He knew that with Xiao Mao's cultivation, there was no way he could block the soul swords. He hastily pulled out many soul strands and chased after the soul swords. Unfortunately, the soul swords were like lightning, and at the same time Xiao Mao was calling for help, they had already pierced into his glabella. Xiao Mao's cries stopped, his eyes closed, and he fainted. It seemed that Xuanyan School's contribution in the great battle of Dao and Sword was about to be destroyed. Xiao Hua's eyes were about to crack, and he was extremely regretful of his negligence. However, his soul strands were still extremely far away from Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua couldn't think of any good way to deal with the soul swords other than his soul strands. Even if he wanted to call out the little white dragon, it was too late. At this critical moment, just as the dozens of soul swords were about to pierce Xiao Mao's glabella, a soft boom sounded. It was as if a ball of mist had exploded, and a ball of dark green brilliance appeared from Xiao Mao's glabella. That brilliance was like a ball of runes, and it rapidly flashed, blocking the dozens of soul swords. Ah! Xiao Hua was dumbstruck. This looks like green seal script. Just as this thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, that rune suddenly dispersed. It really did look like a green seal script, and it spiraled around the dozens of soul swords. Then, the brilliance faded, and the rune rapidly shrank, turning into a ball smaller than the tip of a needle, and shrank into Xiao Mao's glabella. Good! Xiao Hua's divine sense went out, and he saw that Xiao Mao was still unconscious, but there was no change in his aura. Those dozens of soul swords simply didn't have any effect on him. Xiao Hua couldn't help but secretly rejoice. However, when Xiao Hua saw the dozens of soul swords trembling on the soul strands, a fierce look appeared in his eyes. Come! Hundreds of soul strands escaped from the net, and wrapped around one of the soul swords, and without hesitation, sent it into his glabella. And when that soul sword fell into the mysterious dark clouds, it couldn't maintain the shape of a soul sword, and reverted to the appearance of a weapon cultivator. That weapon cultivator's soul was entangled by the soul strands, and he couldn't move at all. He tried his best to struggle free, and he appeared to be extremely panicked. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Of course, this young master wanted to be merciful, but you forced me step by step, and in the end, you actually wanted to use soul swords. Qi Qingyi didn't even put your lives in his eyes, so why should this young master be stingy? Then, Xiao Hua's primordial spirit descended from the pure spirit sky, and like a god, he opened his mouth and swallowed that soul, an indescribable feeling of satisfaction came from Xiaohua's primordial spirit, and it made Xiaohua feel extremely comfortable. Then, Xiaohua didn't hold back anymore, and swallowed 10 weapon spirits in a row. And after swallowing 10 weapon spirits, his primordial spirit didn't feel full at all, as if even if there were 100 weapon spirits, he would still be able to swallow them all. However, at this moment, a ray of light fell from the top of the pagoda, and Qi Qingyi's voice came from the top of the pagoda. Xiaohua, you've already won. Release my 7 Spirit Mountains disciples, and this Qi will immediately remove the Great Formation. Don't. Xiaohua sneered. This Great Formation hasn't been broken yet, and this Xiao is still doing his best to resist. If you go easy on me like this, it won't be easy to explain to Senior Huajian. Sigh, please don't joke around, sir. Qi Qingyi fell into the Great Formation and smiled bitterly. Out of the 81 disciples who set up the Great Formation of my Brahma Pagoda, 24 have already fallen. This Great Formation is far from the previous Great Formation. Sir, please release the other disciples, and my 7 Spirit Mountain will keep our promise and won't make things difficult for you. Is that so? Xiaohua sneered. This Xiao doesn't seem to see your sincerity. All right. Qi Qingyi clapped his hand, and a thumb-sized jade ring appeared. He waved his hand, and the jade ring drew an arc in the air before landing in front of Xiaohua. This is the secret technique for forging weapon spirits that this Qi promised before. It's my 7 Spirit Mountain secret, and now it belongs to you. Oh. You're actually this generous. Xiaohua almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. How could the 7 Spirit Mountain give out the secret technique so easily? Moreover, this jade ring looked very simple and unadorned. It should be a strange item, so how could Qi Qingyi casually take it out from the 7 Spirit Mountain? This Qi can swear a sword oath that this contains the secret technique for forging weapon spirits that my 7 Spirit Mountain obtained, and this Qi promised you before. Qi Qingyi looked at the dozens of soul swords that had already dimmed, and said urgently, Sir, you can release my 7 Spirit Mountain disciples now. How can that be? You've already fulfilled your promise to me. But what about my brother? Xiaohua pointed at Xiao Mao, who had fainted at the bottom of the pagoda. He was injured by your 7 Spirit Mountain disciples, so no matter what, you should compensate him, right? What? Compensate, give Xiao Mao. Qi Qingyi stuttered. This doesn't seem to be part of our previous agreement. Yes, it's not part of our agreement. Xiaohua said with a smile. Our agreement was that this Xiao would destroy the Great Formation, but this Great Formation hasn't been destroyed yet, right? Also, you seem to have broken the agreement and barged into the Great Formation. Furthermore, this Xiao even suspects that you're controlling the Great Formation from the outside. Ow. Fine. Qi Qingyi was truly at his wit's end. Looking at Xiaohua's sinister smile, he gritted his teeth and said, You. What do you want? Xiaohua smiled and extended a finger, waving it in front of Qi Qingyi. What does this mean? Qi Qingyi didn't understand. Then, his face suddenly revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He pointed at Xiao Mao at the bottom of the pagoda and said, Sir, look, Xiao Mao has already woken up. How can this be? Xiaohua didn't even look and hurriedly transmitted his voice, Xiao Mao, if you want something good, close your eyes. Yes, this little brother understands. Xiao Mao's eyes were originally moving, ready to open, but after hearing Xiaohua's words, he immediately closed his already slightly open eyelids, his eyes even more motionless. Qi Qingyi opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. In the end, he looked at Xiaohua and said, What does this mean? A Dharma treasure. Xiaohua waved his finger and said with a smile, a Dharma treasure that's close to spirit chi. How can this be? Qingyi shook his head without hesitation. My 7 spirit mountain is an artifact cultivator. How can we have a Dharma treasure? What's more, a Dharma treasure that's close to a spirit artifact. Then there's nothing we can do. Xiaohua sighed. My brother was injured to this extent and is still unconscious. If it wasn't for a Dharma treasure, how could we wake him up? If he doesn't wake up, then these 60 or so 7 spirit mountain disciples won't be able to wake up either. Then let them accompany Xiao Mao. Qingyi sneered. He turned around and was about to fly to the top of the pagoda. Your 7 spirit mountain really doesn't have it. Xiaohua hurriedly called out to Qingyi. We really don't have it. Qingyi answered resolutely. Then forget it. Xiaohua said irritably, forget about the Dharma treasure. Give your artifact refinement secret technique to Xiao Mao. Artifact refinement technique. Qingyi shook his head even more. We only use our bodies to fuse with artifacts, we don't refine artifacts. These magical artifacts began to reveal the figures of the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains. However, at this time, the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains were no longer as arrogant and disdainful as before. Other than their dispirited expressions, their eyes were filled with fear. When their gazes swept past Xiaohua and Xiao Mao, it was like a mouse that had seen a cat. They quickly dodged and swayed left and right, as if they were scared out of their wits. After the Brahma pagoda disappeared, another 20 magical artifacts appeared in its original position. These magical artifacts glowed faintly and seemed to be of good quality. You guys, keep these for now. Qingyi raised his hand as if he was going to put these magical artifacts into his storage bag. However, his hand was in midair and he pointed at the disciples beside him. Damn it, we've been tricked. When Xiaohua saw these magical artifacts, he immediately realized. These magical artifacts were originally created by the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains. However, their soul swords have been destroyed, so their low-level artifact spirits probably no longer exist. Although these magical artifacts can't compare to the seal of ocean destruction, they're still very good. Why didn't I think of this at the time? Ji Yi is also from the 7 spiritual mountains, so he's naturally the same as them. Of course, I don't want them, but Xiao Mao does. Wouldn't any one of them be better than the one he has now? That's not right. These magical artifacts, why are they exactly the same? I understand now. These magical artifacts are all used to set up the Brahma Pagoda formation. These disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains were specially raised. They probably have the same bloodline, grew up together with you, and fused the same magical artifacts into their bodies. That's why they were able to form the same formation and the same artifact spirit. These magical artifacts, even if they lost their artifact spirits, the 7 spiritual mountains would never leak them out. Qingyi definitely wouldn't dare to take the initiative to give one to himself. However, Xiaohua still shouted, you don't seem to be honest. Aren't these just magical artifacts? You're saying that the 7 spiritual mountains don't have any magical artifacts of their own? No, I don't want the storage bag anymore. I'll exchange it for this magical artifact. Really? Qingyi raised his eyebrows and was overjoyed. However, he immediately realized that his expression was inappropriate and hurriedly covered it up. These magical artifacts are the heirlooms of the 7 spiritual mountains. How could I give them to you? Then, he frowned again and said with some difficulty, however, you did indeed break the formation and Xiao Mao was indeed injured. My previous methods were also a bit extreme. How about this? I'll make the decision. If you return the storage bag to me, I'll compensate Xiao Mao with a magical artifact. As he spoke, he waved his hand and a magical artifact fell into his hand. He looked at Xiao Hua with a smile. This. The change in Qi Qingyi's expression was quite obvious. Xiao Hua was just casually making a fuss. When he heard that Qi Qingyi was actually willing to exchange, he couldn't help but be stunned. Hee, how could I give away something that's already in my hands? Xiao Hua's mind turned and he laughed mischievously. How about you set up another Brahma Pagoda formation and I'll use this storage bag as a wager with this magical artifact. Hearing this, Qi Qingyi's expression became even more bitter. He didn't know whether he should give away the magical artifact in his hand or not. After thinking for a moment, Qi Qingyi said very earnestly, Xiao Hua, I was a bit too excited just now. I didn't think much and just threw the storage bag over. Junior brother, it's easy for you to say that. That's the terrifying phoenix that killed Qin Jian. How do you expect me to stop it? Our 7 Spirit Mountain sword array is not to be trifled with. Didn't you? The junior brother was about to say something when Qi Qingyi waved his hand and said indifferently, let's not talk about it. Why? The junior brother asked curiously. Did you not set up the array? Sigh. Qi Qingyi shook his head. Of course I did. Moreover, the Brahma Pagoda array of 81 people was easily broken by them. Also, then, Qi Qingyi roughly explained the situation. The junior brother was stunned and asked curiously, Senior brother, why didn't you set up a Brahma Pagoda array of 180 people? If you used a 180 people array, what's the difference between that and me personally? Yeah, why didn't you go? The junior brother asked curiously. You don't know anything. Qi Qingyi said softly. If Xiao Hua and the others could kill Qin Jian, why can't they kill us? I admit that I'm no match for Qin Jian. However, our 7 Spirit Mountain can't ignore Senior Huashan's orders. The seniors in our sect entrusted this matter to me because Xiao Hua and the others are Foundation establishment cultivators. I used a Brahma Pagoda array of 81 people because I was confident that I could kill an early-stage Golden Core cultivator. Since this array didn't work, I can naturally explain it to our sect, and our sect can also explain it to Senior Huashan. If I personally went, even if I died, who would know? But Senior brother, you can explain it, but what about our 7 Spirit Mountain? How can we explain it to Senior Huashan? The junior brother sighed again. Hee. This. I naturally have a plan. With that, a sword light appeared under Qi Qingyi's feet, and he flew up. Senior brother, hurry up and tell us, what's your plan? The junior brother hurriedly chased after him and asked softly. Qi Qingyi's voice came from the wind. I have 2 plans. The first one is that I have a secret technique in my storage bag that allows me to fuse with my body into an artifact. It's a secret technique that everyone in our 7 Spirit Mountain knows. Although that's secret technique, it's still our 7 Spirit Mountains. How could you? The junior brother's voice became softer and softer. Think about it. Our 7 Spirit Mountain has no use for this secret technique. What if a Dao sect cultivator wants to learn it on a whim? Qi Qingyi's voice also became softer. Moreover, our sect seniors would allow it. Ha, I understand. You're the second one. The junior brother laughed cunningly. The second one. Qi Qingyi's voice was almost inaudible. Xiao Hua didn't know that Qi Qingyi, whom he had a good impression of, had set up so many obstacles for him. At this moment, he was still proudly lecturing Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao, don't be greedy for that artifact. Although that artifact's quality isn't bad, to be honest, don't you think that there's a 7th Spirit Mountain disciple's soul in it? You won't feel safe using it in the future. Don't worry, Qi Qingyi's storage bag has plenty of materials for refining artifacts. When I have time, I'll personally refine one for you. Aw. Big brother. You know how to refine artifacts? Xiao Mao's originally depressed heart instantly became excited. This. Xiao Hua realized that he had let it slip, so he didn't try to hide it. I do know how to refine a little bit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked him for the forging method for an artifact spirit. Big brother, I really admire you. What else can't you do besides giving birth? Xiao Mao asked with a smile. Although I don't know how to give birth, can the child be born without me? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and said proudly. Fairy Hong Xia, who was originally beside Xiao Hua, immediately blushed. She glared fiercely at Xiao Hua, then flew forward in embarrassment and anger. Xiao Mao elbowed Xiao Hua. Although he didn't say anything, the playful smile in his eyes was obviously laughing at Xiao Hua for blowing his own trumpet. Xiao Hua naturally chuckled and shrugged his shoulders with a helpless expression. Xiao Mao already had a dual cultivation partner, Qin Jian, who had the same name as Qin Jian, so he naturally knew what to do at this moment. He didn't say anything and flew to Li Zongbao's side, as if he wanted to ask for advice, leaving Xiao Hua alone behind. Xiao Hua was helpless. He glared at Xiao Mao's back and could only fly to the front, to the left of the angry fairy Hong Xia. Moreover, from what you said, Xue was a woman who dared to love and hate. But now she has become so gentle, accommodating you and listening to you. Isn't it because she changed for you? Fairy Hong Xia analyzed, don't you like it? Actually. Xiao Hua hesitated and said with a bitter smile, I would rather Xue be the Xue of the past. Her current appearance makes me feel that it is very fake. I feel that this is not the Xue in my heart. That's right. Fairy Hong Xia laughed, this is a contradiction. Xue is willing to sacrifice and change for you. But, you feel that this kind of change is not worth it and might as well not change. What about Xue who has never changed? You feel sick of it and actually in front of others. Laugh at Xue. Damn it, why did it turn back around? Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He had really underestimated the ability of female cultivators to dig up old scores. Darling Xiao, do you think we female cultivators have changed for the better? Or is it better not to change? Fairy Hong Xia asked Xiao Hua with a smile. Both are good, both are good. Xiao Hua's forehead was covered in sweat, one of you changed and one of you didn't change. Wouldn't I like both of you? Then wouldn't Xue and I become the same? Wouldn't you be sick of it? Fairy Hong Xia did not give up. How do I answer this? Xiao Hua was instantly stunned. Fortunately, at this moment, Li Zongbao's voice came from behind them, Junior brother Xiao, do we still fly over like this? Xiao Hua was overjoyed. As expected of senior brother Li, his ability to save people in an emergency was extraordinary. Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, of course. Of course we have to fly like this. Could it be that this one country also has a teleportation array? Big brother. Xiao Mao laughed, Senior brother Li is asking if we should take the flowing cloud flying ship. After all, we just broke the 7 Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda array. If we attract the attention of other sword cultivators, wouldn't we be in trouble? Oh, Xiaohua slapped his forehead and sighed. Look at me, I'm so used to being poor that I even forgot about the flowing cloud flying ship that we rented from Chiqiao sect. He saw that Xiao Mao's dark cloud was very different from his own. The layers of dark cloud were rolling violently, and there was no sound of thunder. Instead, there was a faint dark green color. Xiaohua had already condensed his gold core. Naturally, he knew that after Dao sect cultivators condensed their gold core, their soul would gradually form Heaven Seal runes. These Heaven Seal runes were innate, and they were meant to protect the cultivator's soul. Otherwise, if a gold core cultivator was to fight against a low-level soul cultivator from Meng Mountain and had his soul crushed by the soul technique, wouldn't that be a joke? Moreover, the soul was the most important and mysterious part of a cultivator. As the cultivator's cultivation base increased, the soul would naturally be protected. After reaching nascent soul, the runes would become denser and more profound. Not to mention ordinary soul cultivators, even special soul techniques might not be able to break through them. Cultivators can only use blood sacrifice to nurture the weapon spirit. As for weapon cultivators, it was the same as the earliest method of cultivating weapons. Ouch! Hearing Li Zongbao's words, Xiaohua suddenly hit his forehead and cried out, "Why am I so stupid?" Then, without saying another word, he hurriedly sat down cross-legged and took out the ring. He immersed his spiritual will in it, as if he was carefully comprehending it. Li Zongbao was a little confused. It seemed that this was the legendary, the speaker has no intention of listening. Xiao Mao and Fairy Hong Xia were naturally puzzled as well. Thinking about what Li Zongbao had said, and then thinking about what Xiaohua had said, the two of them were even more confused. However, seeing Xiaohua gradually become happy, the two of them knew that Xiaohua had comprehended something again. Sure enough, in less than an hour, Xiaohua jumped up and stretched out his hand. "Senior Brotherly, congratulations. Why are you so happy?" Li Zongbao asked indifferently. It seemed that other than reviving Kaizhuxia, there was nothing else in this world that could move him. "Senior Brotherly, don't you want to restore the fairy whip? Or even turn it into a spiritual weapon?" Xiaohua smiled. "Oh. Really?" Li Zongbao could not help but raise his eyebrows. Yes, this was the fairy whip. It had been with Li Zongbao for so many years, but it was destroyed by the spirit-swallowing bugs in the spirit-devouring formation. Li Zongbao was even willing to throw away such a damaged magic weapon. Now that he heard that Xiaohua could restore the fairy whip and even upgrade it into a spiritual weapon, how could he not be tempted? "Well, I have some confidence," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Anyway, your fairy whip has been destroyed. Why don't you let me practice with it?" The space fluctuated for a while, and a dazzling yellow light flashed. Then, a 1-foot-long broken golden arrow appeared. That broken arrow only had the arrow tip, the arrow shaft was incomplete, and the arrow feather was missing as well. However, on this broken arrow, thin runes covered it, and it emitted an extremely strange fluctuation. As the fluctuation rippled, a golden light also overflowed on the arrow tip. "Ha ha ha. As expected of a terrifying phoenix, your cultivation is beyond this old man's expectation." A strong sword light flashed from several hundred feet away in the air, and a robust old man wearing a sword robe appeared. This old man was about 50 years old, and his cultivation was at the 3rd grade of illusory sword. His hair was already snow-white, His eyebrows were thin, and his eyes were like a tiger's. There was a faint yellow light flashing inside. Following the appearance of this old man, the broken golden arrow in Xiao Hua's heaven and earth sleeve flashed again, and disappeared. "Where do you think you're going?" Xiao Hua sneered, and the magic power in his body surged. Just as he was about to store the broken arrow into the space, Xiao Hua suddenly felt that the broken arrow's location was suddenly empty. That thing actually escaped his control and disappeared. Ouch! This was the first thing that escaped from Xiao Hua's heaven and earth sleeve. Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised. Humph! The old man's body shone with a golden light, and his face revealed a look of disdain. About 10 feet in front of Xiao Hua, the broken arrow appeared again, and a ray of light returned to the old man's hand. "Who are you? What do you want?" Xiao Hua flew out from the flowing cloud-flying ship, and coldly stood in the air, saying, "When we met the 7th Spirit Mountain, we already made it clear to them." Facing the 7th Spirit Mountain, this young master only wanted to preserve the face of the sword cultivators, and did not use too much strength. From that day onwards, if any sword cultivator dares to harass this young master will definitely let them know how the word regret is written. Arrogant. The old man sneered, and turned to look at Fairy Hong Xia and the rest on the flying ship, saying, "This old man is the Flat Mountain Sword Sect Si Kong Yu. This old man originally wanted to ask you about the Divine Sword Secret Manual. Since you yourself admitted that you defeated the weapon cultivators of the 7th Spirit Mountain, then this old man will not say anything more. As long as you give the Divine Sword Secret Manual to this old man will return, and will not disturb your travels." "What? The Divine Sword Secret Manual? What's that?" Xiao Hua was stunned. Of course you won't admit it." Si Kong Yu stretched out his hand, and the golden broken arrow flashed again. He said coldly, "The Divine Sword Secret Manual is a sacred item of the Sword Realm, and has been lost in the Sword Realm for hundreds of thousands of years. Now that it has reappeared in the Sword Realm, it was actually obtained by a weapon cultivator. The funny thing is that he didn't know, and it was even snatched away by a Dao sect cultivator. What use do you have for this item? Why risk your lives for it?" Ha ha ha. This young master understands. Xiao Hua could not help but laugh when he heard this. This Qi Qingyi is truly sinister. Yes, now that he thought about it, when Qi Qingyi carelessly threw the storage bag to Xiao Hua that day, it was not carelessness, but pure preparation. Later on, he even used a Dharma weapon to exchange for the storage bag, and even sincerely told Xiao Hua that there was something extremely important in the storage bag. It seemed that Qi Qingyi had premeditated all of this. However, Xiao Hua could not say anything. After all, Qi Qingyi had already said that there was something extremely important in the storage bag, and he wanted Xiao Hua to return it. Xiao Hua only thought that the important item belonged to the white bone, and did not care at all. He had already made it clear that even if Xiao Hua returned to find Qi Qingyi, he would not be in the wrong. Moreover, Qi Qingyi and the 7 Spirit Mountains might turn around and ask Xiao Hua for the non-existent Divine Sword Secret Manual. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was really happy. Judging a person, one could not judge by their appearance, or even their words and actions. One could only look at their heart. "Are you taking it or not?" Si Kong Yu said coldly, "Don't think that you are invincible in the Sword Realm just because you killed Qin Jian. Back then, Qin Jian was defeated by me. So that's how it is." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "I reckon that there are many swordsmen in the Huan Kingdom who know that this young master has the Divine Sword Secret Manual. It's a pity that they don't dare to come because they know that they can't defeat Qin Jian. Only someone like you who is not afraid of death, and who defeated Qin Jian before, dares to come and join in the fun. Ha ha ha. Si Kongyu laughed very happily, and the brilliance on the broken arrow flashed rapidly. My sword realm has hidden dragons and crouching tigers, how could a Dao cultivator like you know? To be honest, the swordsmen who went to the sword catacomb to fight are nothing in my sword realm. This old man doesn't care about that Lu Ruochang at all. I heard that under this girl's leadership, your Dao sect cultivators were defeated. This old man is ashamed of your Dao sect. A group of men were defeated by a female swordsman. Black Phoenix Sword Sect. Lu Ruochang is unknown in the Huan Kingdom. Xiao Hua said with a smile, it seems that your Flat Mountain Sword Sect is the unknown one. As if Xiao Hua had poked his soft spot, Si Kongyu sneered, my sword realm has never looked down on one's background. The real sword chi and sword lights were like a biting cold autumn wind, scraping against his skin. Pooh, Si Kongyu opened his mouth, and the small life sword flew out, stabbing at the dream executioner. He didn't dare to recklessly condense the sword energy in his hand anymore, but his whole body flashed violently, and his whole body gradually revealed a golden color. Obviously, Si Kongyu was about to transform into a sword. A huge sword like a broken golden arrow gradually formed in the air. Xiao Hua's dream executioner was blocked by Si Kongyu's small life sword, and the mountain splitter couldn't do anything under Si Kongyu's sword transformation. Whoosh! Xiao Hua also didn't hesitate and withdrew his 2 flying swords. Terrifying Phoenix. I didn't expect you to have the cultivation of a sword cultivator. I'm afraid no one knew about this. Si Kongyu's voice was like the cry of a sword, however, even if you're a 3rd-grade illusory sword, you can't transform into a sword like this old man. Today, I'll let you see the power of my sword domain transformation. As he spoke, the broken golden arrow that was held by the Kunlun mirror suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was actually beside the huge sword that Si Kongyu transformed into. Wang, the huge sword let out a sword cry, and the broken arrow returned to the huge sword like a swallow returning to its nest. The huge sword that was originally shaped like a broken golden arrow suddenly increased in golden color, almost illuminating half of the sky. When Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, the sword light once again shrunk, and a huge broken golden arrow appeared in the air. Suddenly, an irresistible sharpness came out from the broken arrow. Even the cold wind within 100 zhang radius was cut by this sharpness. The broken golden arrow just appeared, and then it dimmed, as if it was about to disappear. Not good. At this moment, how could Xiao Hua not know that the broken arrow that Si Kongyu transformed into wanted to hide in the air and kill him? He hurriedly waved his Daoist robe, and the 2 green and red lights from the yin-yang sword gourd rushed out again, and stabbed at Si Kongyu just like the Dream Slayer and the Mountain Splitter. The Slaying Dream and the Mountain Slaying Sword were 2 beams of sword light. Each beam of sword light was green and red. The yin-yang sword gourd Slaying Spirit Vital Light was also 2 beams of sword light. However, one was green and the other was red. The 2 beams combined were very similar to the Slaying Dream and the Mountain Slaying Sword. In this great battle, who could see clearly between life and death? Who could tell? Seeing the Spirit Slayer Vital Light fly out, Si Kongyu didn't increase his power at all, and the entire sword body suddenly disappeared. Alas, Xiao Hua was somewhat regretful, regretting that he didn't use the Spirit Slayer Vital Light earlier. Now that Si Kongyu had disappeared, how could the Spirit Slayer Vital Light find him? However, just as Xiao Hua was about to use the wind escape technique to fly away and take back the Spirit Slayer Vital Light, the Spirit Slayer Vital Light pierced into the void several meters away from Xiao Hua, and the void was not between Xiao Hua and Si Kongyu. It was even very far away. Oh. Xiao Hua was slightly surprised, but then he was overjoyed. He saw a wave of fluctuation in the void, and in an instant, a golden brilliance pierced through the void. The broken arrow that Si Kongyu transformed into was actually forced out of its invisibility by the Spirit Slayer vital light. Not only that, Si Kongyu's sword body could no longer maintain its sword shape under the two green and red sword lights, and an incredulous and shocked face appeared in the huge broken arrow. However, when this astonishment changed, the green and red Spirit Slayer vital light wrapped around the broken arrow, and with a loud poof, a surge of blood spurted out. Si Kongyu's head flew out of the broken arrow, and the astonishment on his face would never change in this life. Buzz! Then, with a mournful sound, the light of the broken arrow quickly disappeared, and Si Kongyu's headless body fell from the sky. Humph! Fighting with this young master. Your cultivation is still a bit lacking. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and Si Kongyu's storage bag fell into his hand, and the 1-foot-long broken arrow also flew in front of his eyes. What is this? It doesn't seem to be a flying sword. Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the broken arrow floating in the air. It was still shining with an unusually tragic golden brilliance, and it was extremely dazzling. Big brother. Xiao Mao urged the flowing cloud-flying ship to fly over, and the shock in his eyes was needless to say. He had seen Xiao Hua kill Qin Jian before. At that time, Xiao Hua had spent a tremendous amount of effort to kill Qin Jian. And now, facing Si Kongyu, who was also at the 3rd grade of the illusory sword, and had defeated Qin Jian before, Xiao Hua actually killed him without any effort. It had only been a few short years. Xiao Hua's strength had actually undergone an earth-shattering change. It was simply unbelievable to Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua stretched out his index finger and placed it on his lips, indicating for Xiao Mao to be quiet. He said softly, "Big brother has always been low profile. Although he claims that he knows nothing other than giving birth, but big brother still does not want others to know." Yes, little brother understands. Xiao Mao looked at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, who were still unconscious on the flying ship. Chapter 2773. Xiao Hua boarded the airship and looked at Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao. These two were the best of the Dao Sex Foundation establishment cultivators, but their cultivation was too low. Their illusory sword was too much, so it was normal for them to be injured by Si Kongyu. On the other hand, Xiao Mao seemed abnormal. Xiao Hua had already seen Xiao Mao's abnormality, so he was not surprised. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua did not know how to wake them up, so he could only stay at the side. Looking at Xiao Mao skillfully handling the corpses, Xiao Hua sighed, as expected of a disciple of a famous sect, "You know everything. Although I'm also a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, but what the Imperial Thunder sect gave me is really too little. Sigh, I'll just cultivate by myself." Xiao Hua sighed and ordered the primordial spirit in the space to stop working and check the jade slips to see if there were any secret techniques or cultivation techniques. Not long after, Xiao Mao returned to the airship and saw Xiao Hua standing at the side. Fairy Hongxia and the rest were still unconscious, so he knew that Xiao Hua could not do anything. After all, Si Kongyu used sound to attack, so who knew how he knocked them out? Although Xiao Hua's strength was enough to kill Si Kongyu, how could he dare to casually deal with them? Hence, Xiao Mao stood beside Xiao Hua with his hands hanging by his side. The airship was quiet, with only the cold wind blowing. Looking at Xiao Mao, Xiao Hua whispered, "Xiao Mao, don't you think? Si nearly fainted, why didn't you faint? That's strange." I know. Xiao Mao nodded. When I heard that sound, I also felt extremely uncomfortable. My mind felt like it was turning upside down, but then the sound disappeared. I also don't know what happened. Sigh, actually it's not just that. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hong Xia, and whispered the situation in the Brahma Pagoda array, and then smiled. Looks like your background is not simple. Maybe you have an extremely deep background. What background? I don't know. Xiao Mao said sincerely, but I know that Big Brother is my big brother. I know very well how Big Brother treats me. My background is Big Brother's background. Xiao Hua did not comment. He had never thought of borrowing the background of others. Furthermore, both of my parents are dead. In this world, Big Brother is my only family. What other background did he have? It has nothing to do with me. Xiao Mao continued, as for what kind of background he has, he's just a tool for me to take revenge, and also a tool for you, Big Brother. Ha, don't be so heartless. Xiao Hua laughed. What kind of blood relatives can you have in this world? Big Brother is also happy. If you have a good background, it will be good for your future cultivation. This is a good thing. Yes, I understand. Xiao Mao was also happy, but soon after, he said with some sadness, actually, little brother is the same as senior Marshal Brotherly. He hopes to find the opportunity to bring his lover back to life. Little brother also wants to see if the mysterious millions of Meng Mountains has, don't even think about it. Xiao Hua resolutely waved his hand and said, I know that you miss your parents and senior Marshal Brotherly, and you miss Kaizhuxia. However, they had already fallen, just like Tu Hong and Yu Meng. How could they possibly come back to life? It's better to let them rest in peace. This time, Xiao Mao didn't say, yes, little brother understands, but rather agreed in a low voice with some unwillingness. Xiao Hua still wanted to say something, but he raised his eyebrows, as if he had thought of something. Xiao Hua smiled and said, you and Fairy Hong Xia have to leave a mark on Xikong Yu. Otherwise, I'll be famous in Huan country. That's right, Senior Brotherly. We're now heroes of the Great War of Dao Cultivators. Our names are famous in the war. Xiao Mao smiled and said, now that we're deep in Huan country, it's time for us to spread the name of Dao Cultivators. The previous 3 made sword cultivators tremble in fear. Now, the 4 of us are enough to make the sword cultivators of Huan country flee. Good. That's how it should be. Li Zongbao thought for a while, then stretched out his hand and said, give me the immortal piercing whip. Xiao Hua smiled and took out the immortal piercing whip for Li Zongbao. Fairy Hong Xia also took out her innate primordial water and asked Li Zongbao to hit Xikong Yu's corpse. After a while, Xiao Mao and Fairy Hong Xia activated the flying ship and rushed into the clouds. Xiao Hua pulled Li Zongbao to the side and said, Senior Brotherly, take out 9 drops of your blood essence. What? 9 drops. Li Zongbao hesitated. He understood that Xiao Hua was preparing to repair the immortal piercing whip. However, normal magic treasures only needed 1 drop of blood essence to repair. How could he use 9 drops? Furthermore, 1 drop of blood essence had an effect on a cultivator. 9 drops would be even more exhausting. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hua shrugged and said, how can 9 drops be enough? I need 9 by 9, 81 drops of blood essence. And, it must be the blood of the heart. However, these 81 drops of blood essence can be divided into 9 days for me. Also, the time must be different. Blood of the heart. Although Li Zongbao's cultivation was as stable as a rock, he could not help but be moved by Xiao Hua's words. What Xiao Hua wanted was really too shocking. You can choose not to give it. Xiao Hua smiled and said, if you use my blood essence to refine it, it will be my spiritual weapon. Alright. If it were anyone else, Li Zongbao would have flatly refused. But looking at Xiao Hua's smiling face, although he didn't promise anything, Li Zongbao believed that if Xiao Hua didn't have a 70% chance of success, Xiao Hua absolutely wouldn't be like this. Then, Li Zongbao really took out 9 drops of blood essence from the heart. Looking at Li Zongbao's slightly pale face, even Fairy Hongxia frowned. Xiao Hua's actions were really strange. However, this was far from being strange. What everyone saw next was what was truly strange. Xiao Hua spat out a ball of red flame from his mouth. This flame was as calm as flowing water. There were no flames soaring into the sky, and there was no heat. Even Xiao Mao inadvertently used his divine thought to sweep it and found that his divine thought could not see this flame at all. This flame was indeed strange, but compared with Xiao Hua's sacrificial refining technique, this flame was not strange at all. Xiao Hua's hand seals were cast one after another, but the place where the seals landed was not the 9 drops of blood essence from Li Zongbao's heart, but the flame. Under Xiao Hua's control, the flame shuttled between the 9 drops of blood essence like a needle. Not long after, smoke and dust flew out from the blood essence. This is using the flame to refine the blood essence. Xiao Mao was stunned and almost forgot to control the flying boat. Big Brother's technique is really perfect. However, after waiting for another half an hour, Xiao Mao realized that what he thought before was really too far away. Xiao Hua was not only using the flame to refine the blood essence. Xiao Hua was simply using the flame as his own hand, and there was a faint fluctuation of a spell between the flames shuttling. This doesn't seem to be much. When a small shadow condensed from the 9 drops of blood essence, it emitted a bloody brilliance and stood up from the blood essence. Chapter 2774. The immortal piercing whip was floating in front of his eyes. Yes, what Hongxia Fairy, Xiao Mao, and Li Zongbao saw was true. Xiao Hua was using the blood fusion method of the demon realm to help Li Zongbao refine the spiritual weapon. In fact, when Li Zongbao mentioned it before, he had already reminded Xiao Hua. Although the 7 Spirit Mountains artifact spirit forging technique was incomplete, the only thing missing was the most basic blood fusion technique. And who in this world could understand the blood fusion method better than the demons of the demon realm? Moreover, the refining of the 7 Spirit Mountain spirit required a blood sacrifice and thousands of souls. But didn't the blood shadow technique of the demon realm extract the soul from the blood essence? Using the blood fusion method to condense Li Zongbao's 81 drops of blood essence, then using the blood shadow technique to extract the soul from it, then using the blood shadow technique to send the soul into the immortal piercing whip, and then using the 7 Spirit Mountains tempering method to refine the soul and then awaken it. Wasn't this the method of refining the spirit of the 7 Spirit Mountain? But the most difficult thing was that the blood fusion method of the demon realm couldn't use spiritual power. There was no magic art, only demonic fire, demonic blood, and even heavenly thunder. Xiao Hua used the power of heavenly thunder to temper the wishful staff and the ancient silver chain in the myriad thunder valley. At this time, he couldn't arrogantly use the heavenly thunder, so the wisp of spiritual fire in the Buddha's relic was just right. It was just that controlling the spiritual fire consumed too much true essence. Xiao Hua was already at the early gold core stage, comparable to the early nascent soul stage, but after refining the 9 drops of blood essence, he couldn't bear it. When he saw his immortal piercing whip floating in the air, a faint connection appeared in Li Zongbao's heart. This connection had been cut off by the spirit-devouring insects in the spirit-devouring array. Even if Li Zongbao had refined the immortal piercing whip in the early years, he couldn't stop the spirit-devouring insects from wreaking havoc. Now, under Xiaohua's attempt, just a sacrificial refining made him feel something. Li Zongbao felt that as long as he had a thought, the immortal piercing whip could return to his hand. But he held it in. Without Xiaohua's permission, he wouldn't even think about it. The flowing cloud-flying boat traveled through the first glimmer of dawn. The dawn of Huan country was just like the night from before. It was also extremely long. The deathly white sun hung in the east and did not rise in the slightest. It had already been 2 hours. Xiao Huakai opened his eyes. A trace of joy flashed across his eyes. Previously, when he was in the Flame Forest Swamp, he used the spiritual fire to break the blood-colored seal to save Xiangyang. He discovered that controlling the spiritual fire could improve his cultivation, but he had not used it for a long time. Today, when he used it, it was actually effective. Not only did it consume all of his true essence, even his unstable gold core stage had improved. This is really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Why not? Xiaohua thought to himself. Junior brother Xiao, how is it? Li Zongbao had 1,000 words to say, but he didn't know where to start. He could only ask in a low voice. It's fine. Xiaohua waves his hand and says, little brother has underestimated this artifact's spirit tempering technique. I'm afraid I won't be able to refine it again in a short period of time. And, it's fine. Li Zongbao also waves his hand. The immortal piercing whip is an inanimate object. Junior brother is a living person. Junior brother's cultivation cannot be delayed because of this inanimate object. Big brother, with your cultivation, you actually still need to rest. Xiao Mao had seen Xiao Hua's strength and is somewhat astonished. It's irrelevant. Xiao Hua knows that he is unable to explain and says with a smile, helping senior brotherly to refine the spirit artifact, big brother's cultivation can improve. However, the second time will be after 9 days. A few days is fine. Li Zongbao does not care at all. Fairy Hongxia also looks at Xiao Hua with heartache. Her previous anger has already disappeared. The 4 of them all thought that they would be able to refine it a second time after 9 days. Unfortunately, the flying boat only flew for 5 days before 2 third-grade illusory swordsmen caught up with them, 2 third-grade illusory swordsmen. Naturally, Xiao Hua does not put them in his eyes. Even 3 third-grade illusory swordsmen are not below him. However, what about 4 or 5? Furthermore, not all the sword cultivators of Huan country have the bearing to not attack Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and Fairy Hongxia. Facing 5 third-grade illusory swordsmen, Xiao Hua is somewhat tired of dealing with them. Xiao Hua is currently only at the early nascent soul stage, and the attack power of third-grade illusory swordsman is close to the early nascent soul stage. Xiao Hua being able to kill 3 third-grade illusory swordsmen at the same time is already not bad. If there are 2 more, he really can't do it. Not to mention 5 of them. At this moment, above the blue waves, the 4 third-grade illusory swordsmen have already transformed into swords. 4 huge swords of gold, orange, light green and grayish-black, each guarding a corner, trapping Xiao Hua in the center of the 4 symbols sword formation. Moreover, 4 sword forces rush out from the tip of the sword and directly press down on Xiao Hua's head and all around him. The 4 sword forces are like a palm that firmly grasped Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's early gold core stage cultivator pressure is simply not enough to resist. Feeling that his surroundings are as solid as an iron bucket, Xiao Hua's face shows a bitter smile. Looking at the flying boat that has already landed on the waves, he secretly complains in his heart. He has already been fighting for dozens of days. The number of second-grade and third-grade illusory swordsmen that died in his hands is already more than 10. The corpses of these swordsmen, Xiao Hua simply didn't collect them. Like Si Kongyu, they were thrown to the side as a deterrent. However, the development of the situation and the temptation of the Divine Sword's secret manual has already exceeded Xiao Hua's expectations. Almost every 2 or 3 days, there will be a swordsman chasing after him. And these swordsmen chasing after him are all 2nd or 3rd grade illusory swordsmen. It can be said that the number of illusory swordsmen that Xiao Hua killed here is almost catching up with the number of illusory swordsmen that fell in the Great Dao Sword War. Although there are many swordsmen in the Huan country, they are after all 2nd and 3rd grade illusory swordsmen, which is equivalent to the middle and late gold core stage cultivators of the Cultivation 3 countries. If they fall one by one, how big of a disturbance will it cause? So, suddenly, 4 3rd grade illusory swordsmen appeared. Without any explanation, they surrounded Xiao Hua and the others. After one of them sent the flowing cloud flying boat flying, the other 4 surrounded Xiao Hua and beat him up. Just like before, they were all forced to reveal their illusory swordsmen by Xiao Hua. And before Xiao Hua had time to kill any one of them, these 4 people laid out the 4 symbols sword formation. What makes Xiao Hua the most angry is that the sword forces of these 4 people are firmly suppressing him. This pressure is his weakest link at this time, and now it is suddenly discovered by others. Buzz, the unknown cultivator, activates the huge golden sword. The huge sword trembles incessantly, and a hurricane suddenly rises. Although the huge sword has not yet flown out, the sword chi has already reached Xiao Hua's body, causing the golden light protecting Xiao Hua's body to flicker. Seeing the huge golden sword move, the orange-red, light green, and gray-black huge swords simultaneously emit a strong sword cry, and each of them flies up. The 4 huge swords cut through the air, and the sharp sword chi and dazzling sword light attack the space around Xiao Hua in an incomparably chaotic manner. At this time, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator, even a real illusory swordsman would have to face force with force at this time. Boom! The 4 huge swords chop down at the same time, and an extremely small dot faintly appears above Xiao Hua's head. It seems like the void is about to be split open by these 4 huge swords. However, in the instant that Xiao Hua is about to be split into 4 pieces, Xiao Hua suddenly moves. As if he is using all his strength, he waves his hand. Kachacha, in the sky, the dense dark clouds have already covered the sky at an unknown time. Hundreds of lightning bolts, covering the sky and covering the earth, fall down and densely hit the 4 symbols sword formation. The powerful confinement formed by the 4 3rd grade illusory swordsmen loosens, and even the 4 huge swords slightly trembles. This female illusory swordsman opens her small cherry mouth without hesitation, and a lotus root-like small life sword rushes out, seemingly wanting to block the 2 sword lights. Unfortunately, the orange-red sword light flashes, and the small cyan sword flashes extremely quickly. Simply not waiting for the female illusory swordsman to make any extra movements, it has already circled around her neck. An intense sword light flashes out from her snow-white neck, but it is annihilated in the blink of an eye, and blood spurts out from her body. As for the huge golden sword caught in the fire net, the sword light is covered with thin flames. This flame is very quiet, but it is also very bone-eroding. A tall and imposing middle-aged illusory swordsman is also forced to reveal his figure. But just as the swordsman's eyes cleared up, a loud wang rang out from above the swordsman's head. Trembling, the swordsman felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. The swordsman turned pale with fright and hurriedly urged his secret technique to resist the attack of Xiao Hua's soul tool. Poof! Xiao Hua's figure suddenly flashed out from midair. It was the demon realm's concealment technique. Without hesitation, the wishful staff smashed into the head of the swordsman, who was barely able to resist the attack of the soul tool toad. The last third-grade illusory swordsman was killed by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. His figure directly fell from midair. Fairy Hong Xia was so scared that she didn't even have time to retract her ice phoenix body. She hurriedly flew to Xiao Hua's body and let him sit in her arms. So good. Xiao Hua smelled the fragrance of Fairy Hong Xia's hair and closed his eyes in enjoyment. To be able to kill 4 third-grade illusory swordsmen in succession, Xiao Hua had truly exhausted all of his true essence, and also exhausted all of his mental strength. Big brother. Xiao Mao's voice sounded at an extremely inappropriate time. Granny, can't you speak a little later? Xiao Hua almost cursed out loud. Without any other choice, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and tried his best to make his slender eyes round. An extremely bitter expression flowed in his eyes as he replied, I'm fine, it's just that my whole body is weak, I don't have a trace of cultivation. Good. Xiao Mao was frightened by Xiao Hua's eyes. He hurriedly shrunk his neck and continued to do what he was best at for the past 10 days. Xiao Mao skillfully collected the corpses of several sword cultivators that were scattered in different places, several hundred feet apart from each other. He took their flying swords and their storage pouches. Then, he picked up his broken golden arrow and poked them several times before flying back to where he came from. The most dangerous place is the safest place. But there's no place to hide. Sword cultivators can see us with a sweep of their divine sense. Let's go. How can we be discovered by others if we follow this Xiao? Xiao Hua waved his hand and flew up. Where was the slightest bit of depleted true essence? Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and Fairy Hong Xia didn't know what Xiao Hua was up to. But the current Xiao Hua was the absolute master of the 4 of them. What else could they say? Xiao Hua very naturally brought the 3 of them and flew for several li. There were a few mountain ranges here and there were a few blue waves rippling in the ice and snow. Xiao Hua only paused in midair for a moment before flying to the bottom of one of the mountain ranges. Beside an unremarkable mountain rock, there was a cave as tall as a person. Senior Brotherly, please wait a moment. After Xiao Hua landed, he said calmly. With a clap of his hand, several puppets came out from the space and rushed into the cave one by one. These are puppets. Li Zongbao's eyeballs fell out again. He knew better than anyone else how rare these puppets were. And some fortuitous encounters in the early years. Xiao Hua's cultivation was getting higher and higher. There were fewer places where he used puppets. Naturally, he gradually forgot about that cultivator called Imo Qingyuan. Chapter 2778. Li Zongbao smacked his lips and didn't know how to continue the conversation. Well, it's an opportunity from the early years. With the strength of the utmost happiness faction, even his master, Heng, didn't have any puppets. Even among the nascent soul stage masters that Li Zongbao knew, there were only a few who had puppets. But Xiao Hua took out a few puppets at once. Although Li Zongbao had told himself countless times that he wasn't surprised, he still couldn't help but mutter a few words. After an hour, a few more puppets jumped out from the cave. Xiao Hua put them away and said with a smile, everyone, please. The rest of the matter will be handled by the famous Xiao Hua personally. Fairy Hong Xia and the others didn't understand what Xiao Hua was doing, so they could only follow his instructions and enter the cave. The cave wasn't big, but after passing through the cave entrance, there was a huge space below. It was the work of the puppets just now. Xiao Hua stayed outside the cave and covered up the traces left behind by the 4 people. Only then did he carefully fly into the cave and cast out the capital star array's spirit talismans one by one, covering the entire space. When Xiao Hua formed a seal with his hands, the entire space disappeared. Even the entrance of the small cave turned into the same as the surrounding stone walls. Sensing the fluctuations of the array, Li Zongbao and the others released their divine senses. Seeing that the array was so tight that their divine senses couldn't penetrate, the three of them sighed again. At this time, no one spoke. This Xiao Hua, except for giving birth, he knew everything. If the three of them hadn't followed Xiao Hua on this trip to the Huan Kingdom, they wouldn't have known that Xiao Hua, in addition to his cultivation level, could also transform into a sword, had the soul-slaying vital light to kill people, spiritual fire, jade talismans, demonic weapons, soul tools. Any one of these secret techniques was already shocking enough, but Xiao Hua actually took them out in an orderly manner. Every secret technique he took out could reap the life of a grade 3 illusory swordsman. Li Zongbao finally understood why Xiao Hua didn't dare to let others discover his true cultivation level, and why he didn't make a move. Once he made a move, he would kill them all. Just in time. Xiao Hua looked at the stunned three people and smiled. Taking advantage of this leisure time, I'll refine Senior Brother Li's spiritual tool. Senior Martial Brother Li is so powerful, it's really a pity that you don't have a magic treasure. Even though Li Zongbao's heart was as calm as an ancient well, he still blushed a little when he heard those words. Of course, Li Zongbao also believed that Xiao Hua was purely speaking without any intention of ridicule. However, before the great battle of Dao and Sword, Li Zongbao's notion of being number one below core formation had long since transformed into smoke. A kind of thought of, there's always someone better than you, spontaneously arose in his mind. Thank you for your trouble, Junior Brother Xiao. Li Zongbao casually said a few words and found a place to sit down. He took a pill and closed his eyes to meditate. Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Mao also looked at Xiao Hua. They knew that there was nothing they could do to help. One of them took out God's guidance, while the other took out the sun shooting arrows jade strips. Both of them started to meditate. The shock they received was actually no less than Li Zongbao's. This was especially true for Fairy Hong Xia. The pressure she felt was not just from Xiao Hua alone. Xiao Hua had previously helped Li Zongbao refine the immortal poking whip twice. Later, due to the increasing number of sword cultivators chasing after them, he did not dare to waste his true essence to control the spiritual fire. While avoiding the sword cultivators, Xiao Hua refined the whip 7 times one by one. Of course, Xiao Hua spent nearly 100 days refining the whip 7 times. Outside the cave, there were still some fearless illusory swordsmen chasing after them. However, when they saw the corpses of the 4 third-grade illusory swordsmen, most of them gave up the idea of killing them. Only 5 or 6 of them did not give up their evil intentions and continued to chase after them. However, at this time, they did not dare to act alone. Even if there were 4 of them together, they were still worried. In the end, the 5 or 6 of them gathered together. Of course, behind them, there were many second-grade and first-grade illusory swordsmen following them from afar. These swordsmen did not dare to come close. They seemed to be the disciples of the third-grade illusory swordsmen or other disciples of the Sword Gate who wanted to take advantage of the situation. These swordsmen ignored the cave where Xiao Hua and the others were hiding. Even if some sword cultivators used their divine sense to scan the area, they would not be able to find the 3 people inside the capital star array. On this day, after Xiao Hua sacrificed the last 9 drops of blood essence to produce a thin blood shadow, Xiao Hua once again muttered and pointed his finger at the immortal piercing whip that was floating in the air. A blood-red little person scuttled out from the immortal piercing whip. This little person had a nose and eyes, and it somewhat resembled Li Zongbao. Quick! Xiaohua pointed at the thin blood shadow again. The blood shadow rushed into the little person with a whoosh. Suddenly, the little person emitted a thick blood-red light. Big brotherly, sit down. Don't resist. Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao, who was beside him, and said in a low voice. Oh, okay. Li Zongbao thought that everything was done. He did not expect that Xiaohua still had other instructions. Therefore, he did not dare to neglect and sat cross-legged beside Xiaohua. After Li Zongbao sat down, Xiaohua extended his left thumb and slowly pressed it between Li Zongbao's eyebrows. Whoosh! A sound like flowing water came from the place where the thumb touched. A sapphire blue light blossomed along with Xiaohua's thumb. Looking at Li Zongbao's expression again, the moment the light blossomed, it slightly stagnated and then returned to normal. Xiaohua's hand drew an arc in the air. That sapphire blue light fell like a meteor into the blood-red little person in the air. Pooh! As if a candle was lit, a sapphire blue flame appeared in the blood-red little person's body. Following the burning of the flame, wisps of faint smoke rushed into the air. The blood-red color of the little person's body dimmed along with the faint smoke. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the little person had become transparent. However, the more transparent the little person was, the more obvious the outline of the human figure was. Go! Finally, Xiaohua released his soul thread again and sent the little person into the immortal poking whip. Whoosh! The moment the little person entered the immortal poking whip, a sapphire blue light like a clear spring appeared at the tip of the immortal poking whip and quickly flowed towards the entire immortal poking whip. Pow, 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 it sounded like beans being fried. Runes began to peel off the surface of the immortal piercing whip. As the rune disappeared, more and more runes appeared one after another, layer after layer, like bamboo shoots sprouting from the ground. Immediately, a sapphire blue light filled the entire space. When the runes reached the end of the immortal piercing whip, a loud buzzing sound was emitted from the immortal piercing whip. The sapphire blue light abruptly retracted from one end of the immortal piercing whip and rapidly surged to the other end. Whoosh! Without waiting for the light to flow to the other end, the light at the tip of the whip suddenly rushed out of the immortal poking whip and rushed into the stone walls of the space. It pierced through the capital star formation's defense and rushed into the sky outside the cave. Spirit Tool. Heavenly Omen. Xiaohua's body tensed up. He felt the sword origin in his body rapidly circulating. The Dream Slayer and Mountain Splitter were about to come out of his body. Xiaohua couldn't help but groan. The sapphire blue brilliance shot several hundred feet high before falling back down. After the brilliance of the immortal piercing whip flashed 9 times, the entire brilliance was suddenly restrained within the immortal piercing whip. There was no longer any movement. However, Li Zongbao, who had already opened his eyes, already felt that the immortal poking whip had an indescribable connection with him. He seemed to be the immortal poking whip and the immortal poking whip seemed to be him. Although he didn't make any hand seals, as long as he willed it, the immortal poking whip would definitely attack according to his will. Good. Seeing this, Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "The spirit tool is done. Senior Marshal Brotherly, as long as you nourish it with your primordial spirit, the spirit inside the spirit tool will sprout and gradually grow. In the future, my hard work will all depend on Senior Marshal Brotherly." Then, Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense again and said with a bitter smile, "This spirit tool has only just been refined, but it can actually break my formation. If Senior Marshal Brotherly successfully nourishes it in the future, what kind of power will it have? Little brother is looking forward to it." Hee, Li Zongbao let out a rare laugh. "This is all thanks to Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. My immortal poking whip has seen the light of day again." As he spoke, Li Zongbao held the immortal poking whip in his hand. However, seeing that it was already completely different from the previous immortal poking whip, he laughed again and said, "This immortal poking whip is no longer the immortal poking whip. Junior Martial Brother Xiao, what do you think this spirit tool should be called?" Previously, it was a magic tool that could kill one person with poke. Now that it is a spirit tool, one whip can kill several people, dozens of people, or even hundreds of people. Why don't we call it the Immortal Killing Whip? Xiao Hua said after thinking for a while. Okay, let's do as Junior Martial Brother Xiao says. Li Zongbao said happily, this thing will be called the Immortal Killing Whip in the future. I can, but don't tell Senior Martial Uncle Heng Ming that this is little brother's work. Xiao Hua nodded. Of course. Li Zongbao wanted to say something, but Xiao Hua's expression suddenly changed. Without waiting for him to say anything, Xiao Hua said to Fairy Hongxia, hurry up and leave. There are swords chasing after us. What? Swords? Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao turned pale with fright. They knew that they were definitely not a match for swords. If they stayed here, they would only be a burden to Xiao Hua. They immediately flew up from the ground and rushed out of the space. Fairy Hongxia was still transmitting her voice to Xiao Hua, telling him the location of the meeting. Senior Martial Brotherly, you should go too. Seeing that Li Zongbao was hesitating, Xiao Hua urged, the weapon spirit of the Immortal Killing Whip is not formed yet, you can't help me much. Why don't you go and protect Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia? I'll leave the two of them to you. Okay. Even if I have to give up my life, I will ensure their safety. Li Zongbao knew that this was not the time to hesitate. He swung the Immortal Killing Whip and chased after Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao without looking back. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.